Chapter 269. The new dish that Bufang prepared this time could not be considered a new dish because this dish had always been in Bufang's memory. However, it was lacking an important ingredient, and that was vinegar. The vinegar was the key to this dish. The better the vinegar, the better the taste of the dish. Carefully holding the 8 spirit fruit vinegar, Bufang returned to the kitchen. Nothing had changed in the kitchen. 2 small stoves were not far away, and steam was rising from them. As for Bufang's stove, it was clean and tidy. Bufang placed the fruit vinegar on the stove and washed his fair hands with the spirit spring water. After wiping them dry, Bufang walked straight to the freezer. When he opened the freezer, a chilly chill suddenly surged out from within. Within the chill, there was a surge of spirit energy. System, is the dragon liver in the dragon liver popsicle a real dragon liver? Bufang asked in puzzlement. That's right, the dish that he was going to make this time was a reward given by the system, the dragon liver popsicle. However, he had never made it before because the system had notified him that the dragon liver would be provided. However, the vinegar, which was the most important ingredient, had to be found or brewed by Bufang himself. A good vinegar required a long time to be aged. Where would Bufang have the time to make aged vinegar? It was a very arduous task. The 8 spirit fruit vinegar the chubby elder had been brewed for several decades. Moreover, it was divided into 8 barrels, and the vinegar in each barrel had to be changed every year. During the conversion process, the vinegar had to be very careful so that no mistakes could be made. Therefore, the vinegar was very precious, and the brewing process was also very difficult. Bufang was very satisfied with the 8 spirit fruit vinegar. That was why he was going to make this dish. The dragon liver provided by the system is the liver of a 7th grade spirit beast, the Frost Domain Lesser Dragon. After going through strict processing, the dragon energy and spirit energy within were preserved, allowing the two to fuse together. Through the freezing process, the liver of the lesser dragon was preserved. The system solemnly replied. The liver of a lesser dragon. Bufang furrowed his brows. It would be great if it was the liver of a real dragon. System, can there be a higher grade dragon liver? For example, a real dragon? Bufang asked reluctantly. After pondering for a long time, the system finally answered Bufang's question. True dragons are spiritual beasts above the 9th rank. Host's current level is too low to obtain a true dragon's liver. The system can recommend other dragon livers. 8th grade deep sea flood dragon liver. Exchange requirement, 13,000 crystals. 8th grade ice fire demonic dragon liver. Exchange requirement, 15,000 crystals. The system prompted him to exchange for 2 types of dragon livers. However, when he saw the price, he couldn't help but click his tongue. He shook his head and chose to give up. In fact, there was an even higher tier rank 9 polar ice dragon liver, but his current level was too low to qualify for it. He took out the dragon liver that was sealed in sparkling ice crystals from the freezer. There were strange patterns on the dragon liver, and there were faint traces of blood on it. In the ice crystals, it looked like beautiful amber, blooming with a brilliant light. Bufang did not shatter the ice crystal. Instead, he placed it aside. The temperature in the kitchen seemed to have dropped a lot. Bufang took out a spirit fruit from the system's storage space. This was a 5th grade spirit fruit. Its flesh was crispy and tender, just like freshly fried peanuts. Green smoke curled around his hand, and the dragon bone kitchen knife appeared in it. Crack! The shell of the spirit fruit was directly smashed, revealing the flesh inside. Pinching the flesh, Bufang's face was indifferent. He swung his kitchen knife horizontally, smashing the flesh into small pieces. After preparing a small bowl of minced fruit, Bufang turned on the stove and started a fire. He placed the minced fruit into the stove and stir-fried it. A mellow fragrance wafted out from the minced fruit, and he sprinkled some seasonings into it. Then, Bufang poured all the pulp into a big basin. After being stir-fried, the pulp became extremely sparkling and translucent. They were like tiny diamonds, and each of them was emitting a dazzling radiance. After preparing the pulp, Bufang pulled over the flood dragon's liver that was sealed in the ice crystal. Twirling the dragon bone kitchen knife around his wrist, Bufong lightly tapped on the top center of the ice crystal. Fine white cracks spread out from the ice crystal, and they looked like ferocious dragon whiskers. True energy surged in Bufong's hand. He covered the ice crystal with his palm, and a chill was instantly transmitted from the ice crystal to Bufong's palm, causing his whole body to tremble. Crack! True energy surged violently, following the dragon whiskers and drilling into the ice crystal. Then, the ice crystal cracked like bricks, and pieces fell off, revealing the intact flood dragon's liver. A sweet and violent fragrance surged out from the flood dragon's liver. This was the unique smell of flood dragon's liver. This piece of flood dragon's liver was about the size of a wash basin, and it could be considered a small flood dragon's liver. Bufong sized up the flood dragon's liver, and the kitchen knife in his hand cut out a piece. The dragon bone kitchen knife was extremely sharp, and it was easy for it to cut the flood dragon's liver, which had been sealed in ice for a long time. If it were another kitchen knife, it would not be so easy. The wash basin-sized piece of flood dragon's liver was continuously cut and polished by Bufong. In the end, only a palm-sized cube of flood dragon's liver was left. Even though it was smaller, the patterns and spirit energy within the flood dragon's liver were still as turbulent as before. Picking up a piece of sparkling ice crystal, Bufong's kitchen knife spun rapidly, and he directly cut the ice crystal into a popsicle. With his current carving skills, it was not difficult for him to do this. After stuffing the popsicle into 1/3 of the flood dragon's liver, Bufong began the next step. He used the dragon bone kitchen knife to dig out the veins on the flood dragon's liver, and he gathered them into a pit. After taking the chubby elder's 8 spirit fruit vinegar, the next step was the highlight. He carefully spread out his true energy, and it covered the veins and the pit surroundings, so that the viscous fruit vinegar would not be frozen in an instant by the flood dragon's coldness. After the fruit vinegar filled the gaps and pits of the flood dragon's liver, he covered the veins and pits with the flood dragon's liver's mud. This caused the flood dragon's liver to look undamaged on the surface, but the inside was actually filled with sweet and sour fruit vinegar. After making so much, the flood dragon's liver popsicle was not finished. He took out the previously prepared, sparkling, diamond-like fruit pulp and placed the flood dragon's liver popsicle into it. The diamond-like fruit pulp stuck to the flood dragon's liver, densely covering it. Light shone on the sparkling and translucent fruit pulp, making it seem as if it was twinkling. It was as beautiful as the most exquisite work of art, and it was breathtaking. Even Bufong could not help but exclaim in admiration when he looked at the flood dragon's liver popsicle. It was really too beautiful. He took out a round-shaped ice cube and covered the flood dragon's liver popsicle on the white porcelain plate. A dense cold air dissipated around the ice cube. The flood dragon's liver popsicle was completely finished. This was a dish that was different from the previous ones. It could even be said to be a dessert with complicated processes. The ingredients were precious, and the steps were complicated. The requirements for true energy control were even stricter. Although the knife and carving skills were not high, they were not low either. At the very least, if it was Xiao Xiaolong or Yu Fu, they would definitely not be able to make it. Carrying the white porcelain plate covered with the ice cube, Bufong slowly walked out of the kitchen. In a small store, light shone on the ice cube. Under the light, the ice cube seemed to be glowing. At this moment, there were many customers in the store. They were attracted by the dish in Bufong's hands. They raised their heads and looked at it in surprise. Xiao Xiaolong and Yu Fu stretched their necks and looked curiously at Owner Bu's new dish. Every time Owner Bu brought out a new dish, they would be extremely curious and amazed. They did not know if the dish he brought out this time would shock everyone. The chubby elder was even more curious. He was originally a chef, and he was a chef with decent culinary skills. If it was not for the return of Yi Xiling, who said that his dishes were not as good as Owner Bu's dishes after tasting them, he would not have bothered to travel thousands of miles to the Light Wind Empire. Although the Light Wind Empire was a human empire, it was not considered anything in the vast hidden dragon continent. It could even be said that in the southern region, it was just a small place. Squinting his eyes, he looked at the dish in Bufong's hands. He suddenly raised his eyebrows. With his eyesight, he could naturally see what was in Bufong's hands. An ice cube? The elder muttered in doubt. Walking in front of the elder, Bufong placed the dish on the table. The corners of his mouth curled up, and he said calmly, "New dish, Flood Dragon's liver popsicle. Please have a taste." After saying that, Bufong raised his slender finger and flicked it on the ice cube. Chapter 270. Bufong's slender fingers lightly tapped on the ice cap, causing it to emit a slight cracking sound. A wisp of white, true energy surged from Bufong's fingers, then rumbled into the ice cap. Then, under the dumbfounded gazes of the crowd, the ice cap was like a blooming flower bud, unfolding piece by piece. An ice-cold chill shot up from within the ice cap, like a mushroom cloud hitting the ceiling, rolling away. A ray of light, 2 rays of light, densely packed light beams blossomed from the white porcelain plate, reflecting an exquisite radiance in the eyes of the crowd. However, contrary to everyone's expectations, the fragrance that they imagined did not appear. Instead, there was only radiance circulating in front of their eyes, but no fragrance permeated the air. This was an extremely inconceivable matter, because for the majority of people, the fragrance of a dish was the prerequisite to determine whether it was delicious or not. As the brilliance gradually receded, everyone could not help but squint their eyes as they looked at the porcelain plate. The ice crystals on the fatty's ice cap had shattered into pieces. In the middle of it lay a cube inlaid with ice crystals and diamonds. This can be eaten? Could it be that owner who made a mistake? This is a work of art, right? How is this a dish? It's so beautiful, but can it really be eaten? The diners were extremely doubtful, and one after another, they were filled with doubt. There was no fragrance, and from the appearance, it didn't seem like a dish that could be eaten. This was completely different from the style of dishes that they had in mind, and it was no wonder that they were doubtful. Even Xiao Xiaolong and Yu Fu were a little doubtful, as they had never seen such a strange-looking dish before. The slightly plump elder's face was filled with astonishment, but very quickly, this expression disappeared. He furrowed his brows, and after sizing up the ice crystal cube, he raised his head and looked at Bufong with doubt. "Owner Bu, what kind of dish is this?" the elder asked. He was an experienced chef, and he had seen many strange dishes, so he wasn't too surprised. However, he really couldn't tell what this dish was, so he directly asked Bufong, hoping that Bufong could give him an answer. The corners of Bufong's mouth curled up slightly. He smiled, but didn't say anything. He just pointed at a popsicle protruding from the ice crystal cube. The chubby old man narrowed his eyes and reached out to grab the popsicle. Suddenly, a chill was released from the popsicle, causing his face to tremble. Lifting the popsicle, the ice cube was lifted as well. "Take a bite. There might be a surprise," Bufong said. Is this really edible?" The chubby old man looked at Bufong suspiciously. When he saw Bufong's calm expression, he narrowed his eyes, opened his mouth, and bit a small corner. "Oh!" The chubby elder had just bitten down when his eyes suddenly widened. His pupils constricted, and his face was filled with disbelief. Xiao Xiaolong and the rest were also shocked. Something was wrong? The shock in the old man's eyes faded slightly. He clenched his teeth hard, but did not feel as cold as he had imagined. The ice crystals on the surface of the cube were not ice cubes at all. Crunch, crunch. The old man bit off a small corner and began to chew. Instantly, the crisp sound of a spirit fruit being crushed rang out in his mouth. The more the old man chewed, the more shocked he became. The surface of the fruit was crispy, and the middle layer had a strange, soft taste, like soft mud. Within it, there was a very familiar smell. It was his 8 spirit fruit vinegar. That diamond-like thing was actually the fruit's pulp. Oh, that's right. It was the 5th grade jadeite fruit. If the fruit's pulp was stir-fried, it would become as translucent as ice crystals. Moreover, the fragrance would be contained within it. After entering the mouth, it would completely blossom and burst forth. The old man closed his eyes, feeling the thick but not greasy fragrance of the pulp blossoming in his mouth. The pulp was as warm as jade, the meat paste was mellow and fragrant, and the 8-spirit fruit vinegar was sweet and sour. In an instant, he was immersed in a strange atmosphere. Suddenly, it was as if a ray of light flashed in his eyes. His entire body stiffened as he swallowed the delicious food in his mouth. When it entered his stomach, it felt as if it was about to explode. It was as if a flood dragon had spread its wings and was roaring. With a stomp of its foot, the entire mountain trembled violently. Could this really be a dragon's liver? The old man looked at Bufong in disbelief. His heart was filled with shock. Bufong nodded his head, answering the old man's bewilderment. This is the 7th grade spirit beast, the Frost Domain flood dragon's liver. Although it is not as delicious as a true dragon's liver, it is extremely delicious when paired with the stir-fried jade fruit. Finally, I especially added your 8-spirit fruit vinegar, which raised the taste of the entire dish to another level. Vinegar is the key to this dish, Bufong said. If it wasn't for this vinegar, I really didn't intend to cook this dish. The old man nodded his head seriously. There was a hint of pride on his face. Then, he looked at the cube with bright eyes. As he bit down on it, the fragrance burst forth from within his body. He was so happy that he wanted to close his eyes. He unconsciously felt as if he was sitting cross-legged on the back of a flood dragon, following it as it spread its wings and soared into the sky. Crunch! Unknowingly, the old man had already finished eating the entire popsicle. With a single bite, the popsicle was crushed into pieces. Without the support of true energy, the popsicle directly melted and turned into ice-cold water. Delicious! It is indeed delicious. This old man has never tasted such a unique delicacy. This kind of delicacy is worthy of my fruit vinegar. Ha ha! The old man laughed heartily. Seeing that the old man was so excited after eating the delicacy, the surrounding people felt as if something was scratching their hearts. Xiao Xiaolong and Yu Fu were even more amazed. They looked at Bufong with admiration. As expected of Owner Bu, he was able to come up with all kinds of strange things. Owner Bu, can you give this old man another popsicle? This old man will provide the fruit vinegar. The old man licked his lips, squinted his eyes, and looked at Bufong with a grin. At this moment, he was sure that Yi Xiling did not lie. This Owner Bu looked young, but his culinary skills had reached an unimaginable level. This dragon liver popsicle was beyond his understanding of dishes. It was full of novelty, and the taste simply left him with endless aftertastes. Sure, but there will be a fee. 800 crystals for one serving. Bufong leaned back in his chair and glanced at the old man. The corners of his mouth curled up as he said, "Didn't you say that the dish was not delicious? Weren't you showing off just now? Why don't you continue showing off?" Bufong crossed his arms in front of his chest and looked at the old man indifferently. When the surrounding people heard Bufong's price, they all sucked in a breath of cold air. 800 crystals. Was Owner Bu trying to rob them? This was just a dish. Your distinguished self should be able to taste the difference and unique characteristics of this dish. The true energy contained within, the deliciousness of the dish, and the difficulty of making it. It's worth 800 crystals, Bufong said. The old man's face was filled with pain. That's right, with his culinary skills, he could naturally see that this dish was extraordinary. Regardless of whether it was the true energy circulating within his body that had unknowingly increased by several times, or the fine control of true energy during the making of this dish, they all made him exclaim in admiration. One dish, 800 crystals. This was under the condition that he provided the 8-spirit fruit vinegar. It was indeed worth it. Good. I am convinced by Owner Bu's culinary skills. Here are 800 crystals. I'll have to trouble Owner Bu to make another dish for this old man. The old man clenched his teeth, took out a bulging bag, and placed it on the table. He looked at Bufong with a burning gaze as he said this. Bufong stood up, casually waved his hand, and put away the crystals. Then, he opened his mouth to speak. If you want to eat the dragon liver popsicle, then please come back tomorrow. Oh, Remember to leave behind the fruit vinegar, Bufang said. After he finished speaking, he turned around and walked toward the kitchen. The old man was startled for a moment, but he wasn't annoyed. With a simple and honest smile, he asked Yu Fu to fetch another small plate from the kitchen. After pouring some fruit vinegar into it, he put away the gourd and left the store while humming a tune. So be it tomorrow. In any case, he wasn't in a hurry. He was extremely curious about this dragon liver popsicle. A delicacy that could utilize his fruit vinegar in such a manner really made his heart itch. He must savor it carefully tomorrow and find out the method to make this dish. When he returned, he would be able to make it himself. This way, his fruit vinegar would have a place to shine. After the old man left, the surrounding customers also dispersed. Today's opening hours were about to end. Ouyang Xiaoi and Xiaolong bid farewell to Bufang and left the store. The door was closed, and the opening hours were over. Rest early. Tomorrow, I will inspect your cutting and carving skills. When Bufang was about to return to his room, he said to Yu Fu, who was about to enter the kitchen to practice cooking. The latter was slightly startled. Owner but wanted to inspect his cutting and carving skills. Yu Fu's complexion was a little strange. Wouldn't that mean that Xiaolong was in trouble? Chapter 271. Light Wind Empire, Border City. A few thousand miles away from the coastline of the Light Wind Empire, there was a towering city that resembled a colossus. This city was enormous and covered a vast area. The city walls were so tall that they reached into the clouds and blocked out the sun. Border City was the largest city in the Light Wind Empire's defensive line. It had a long history and was known as one of the three ancient cities of the Light Wind Empire, along with the Imperial City and Western Mystery City. Looking from afar, Border City was like a gigantic god of war. It stood majestically, with a simple and unadorned aura like a boulder. It sat at the border of the Light Wind Empire and guarded its territory. Outside Border City, on a vast plain, a long line of troops was moving slowly. Among the troops, there were carriages pulled by spirit beasts with strong auras. Beside the carriages were warriors riding on single-horned spirit horses. This group of people was heading straight for Border City. The heavy sound of a bugle horn resounded from within Border City. It was deafening and spread out mightily. The gates of Border City creaked open, and many armored soldiers of the Empire walked out. They cupped their hands and greeted the troops respectfully. Ji Qingyu had an imposing appearance and an indifferent expression. Riding on the single-horned spirit horse, he was as steady as Mount Tai. Looking at the soldiers greeting him respectfully, the corners of his mouth curled into a smile. As soon as they entered Border City, they felt as if they had stepped into another world. The streets of Border City were completely occupied by soldiers guarding the city. Ji Qingyu's troops entered and stopped in the middle of the troops. The curtain of the carriage was opened, and an old man slowly emerged from within. This was an elderly man dressed in a black robe. His face was full of wrinkles, and his aura was fluctuating. With his hands clasped behind his back, he looked at the people around him and let out a light sigh. Among the soldiers, many figures also dressed in black robes appeared and bowed respectfully to the elderly man. "Welcome, Shura Sect Venerable." The black-robed warriors spoke one after another and bowed respectfully. The Shura sect was not one of the top 10 sections. It was an ancient sect that had resurfaced today, waiting for an opportunity to rise again, and the Light Wind Empire was their first stepping stone. The wrinkles on the old man's face twitched. He waved his hand and said to the crowd, "The High Priestess sent me here today to assist King Yu in his ascension to the throne. Secondly, it's to fight for the rise of our Shura sect. Our Shura sect has been silent for too long. Most of the people in the world have forgotten the glory of our Shura sect. I'm afraid those damned powers in the 100,000 mountains, the wildlands, and the illusory spirit swamp don't even remember us. However, they will soon remember the fear of being dominated by us." The eyes of the Azura's Gate disciples shone with a fanatical light. Ji Qingyu narrowed his eyes as he witnessed this scene. A ripple emerged in his heart, and his expression became even more solemn. This Shura sect was the power behind the Mahayana island. It was Zhao Muxing's backer. Now, it was Ji Qingyu's backer. It was Ji Qingyu's backer to regain the throne. However, deep down, he was well aware that the Shura sect was a double-edged sword. Moreover, it was an extremely sharp double-edged sword. If it was used improperly, it would not be as simple as hurting one's bones. The Wuliang mountain towered into the clouds like a long sword that soared into the sky, piercing straight into the clouds. Inside the Celestial Arcanum sect's mountain gate, an old man with white hair and brows sat cross-legged in a dilapidated two-story wooden house. In his withered hand, he held a few yellow jade talismans. Suddenly, he opened his eyes. A strong light seemed to flash in his eyes. The yellow jade talismans in his hand suddenly floated up and floated in the air, forming a strange pattern. The old man's face was solemn. He took a deep breath, formed a strange seal with both hands, and pointed at the jade talisman. A strange blood-red color seeped out from the jade talisman. The thick smell of blood spread throughout the two-story wooden house. The old man was suddenly frightened, and his eyes slightly shrank. The Shura sect, whose second nature is to kill, has actually appeared again. How can this evil sect be so tenacious? It seems like the southern region will once again be stirred up by a storm of blood. The old man muttered to himself and let out a long sigh. With a twist of his hand, the blood-red color on the yellow jade talisman immediately disappeared. The jade talisman fell into his hand. The old man squinted his eyes as if he was calculating something. The Light Wind Empire again? Why are all the big events happening in the Light Wind Empire these days? The old man's face trembled, and he felt a little strange. But this time, I'm afraid the Light Wind Empire will be in big trouble. Early in the morning, the sunlight shone into the room, dispelling the chill of the night. Bufang opened his eyes, comfortably yawned, and stretched. His room was still the most comfortable. Getting off the bed, Bufang washed up and went to the kitchen. Yu Fu hadn't gotten up yet, and Xiao Xiaolong hadn't arrived either. Bufang went to the stove, twirled the kitchen knife, and began to practice his cutting and carving skills. Having not practiced for a few days, Bufang missed this feeling. After practicing his cutting and carving skills for a while, Yu Fu came down from upstairs. After greeting Bufang, she went to her stove and began to practice her cutting and carving skills. Xiao Xiaolong hasn't arrived yet. You practice for a while. When he arrives, we will start the test, Bufang said with a frown. Yu Fu nodded obediently. She blinked her eyes, picked up the prepared ingredients, and began to incessantly cut the vegetables. Bufang put away the big kitchen knife and began to cook the sweet and sour ribs. After a while, the rich aroma of the meat wafted throughout the kitchen. Smelling this aroma, Yu Fu's face revealed an intoxicated expression. Her culinary skills were still far from Bufang's. Just from the aroma of the dish, one could see the disparity between them. She still had a long way to go. Carrying the sweet and sour ribs, Bufang opened the door and walked out of the store. It was a spring morning, and the temperature was still a little chilly. A gust of wind blew, and the fragrance of the sweet and sour ribs in Bufang's hand spread out. It was incomparably charming. Blackie, it's time to eat. Bufang placed the sweet and sour ribs in front of the big black dog, who was still lying at the door, and said calmly. Blackie lazily opened its doggy eyes and glanced at the sweet and sour ribs in front of it. Its doggy mouth twitched, and it didn't seem to be as excited as before when it saw the sweet and sour ribs. This plump dog's human-like expression immediately startled Bufang. What was going on? However, when the black dog's doggy nose sniffed the sweet and sour ribs, its doggy eyes instantly lit up. It glanced at Bufang with a hidden bitterness and impatiently gobbled down the sweet and sour ribs on the porcelain plate. Its appearance was as if it had been starving for several lifetimes. Bufang raised his eyebrows. After stroking Blackie's smooth and untainted fur, he stood up and prepared to return to the store. However, just as he reached the door, he saw Xiao Xiaolong's leisurely figure at the entrance of the alleyway. Do you usually come so late? Then why are you still practicing your knife skills and carving skills? Bufang looked at Xiao Xiaolong and said directly. His tone already carried a hint of anger. Xiao Xiaolong's whole body involuntarily trembled, and he slapped his head. His complexion was somewhat dark. He had forgotten that Bufang had already returned. During the days when Bufang wasn't in the store, he had become used to slacking off. Enter the kitchen. I will test your knife skills and carving skills. If you fail, you will hold a heavy kitchen knife and practice your knife skills and carving skills for an entire day. Bufang seemed to have guessed something. He immediately snorted coldly, flung his sleeves, and turned around to enter the kitchen. Xiao Xiaolong's face was as dark as the bottom of a pot. He entered the kitchen with a gloomy face, and when he saw Yu Fu diligently practicing, he immediately felt a headache coming on. Bufang pulled out a chair and sat down. He expressionlessly looked at Yu Fu and Xiao Xiaolong, and his eyes were filled with a scrutinizing gaze. As my apprentices, I hope that you two will be diligent and not slack off. A true chef will only be able to achieve success after practicing for 10 years. I hope that you two will remember this principle and work hard to practice your culinary skills. Now, let's start the test of your knife skills and carving skills. The two of you will compete with each other, and within the allotted 1 hour, the one who processes the most ingredients will not be punished. Bufang calmly said. He was also an apprentice chef, so he naturally knew the importance of diligence. Yu Fu and Xiao Xiaolong nodded, indicating that they understood. Beside the two of them, there was a big pile of plump radishes, and this time, Bufang's request was for the two of them to cut all the radishes into strips within the allotted 1 hour. Yu Fu was fine, and her face was tranquil, without the slightest bit of panic. Xiao Xiaolong, on the other hand, was different. His face was as dark as the bottom of a pot, and his big eyes kept rolling around in panic. Chapter 272. The Imperial City in the spring, accompanied by the fluttering spring rain, presented a sense of tranquility and silence. The huge, ancient city was situated on a vast plain, simple and imposing. Outside the Imperial City, the greenery on both sides of the official road was lush. The flower buds swayed in the wind and pollen drifted down, creating a tranquil atmosphere. On the official road, there were people from all over the Light Wind Empire rushing to the Imperial City. The Imperial City was the economic, political, and cultural center of the Light Wind Empire. Naturally, it was a place many people yearned to visit. In the distant sky, a black that was slowly enlarging. That black that looked like a ball of darkness to the naked eye, but it was rapidly approaching the Imperial City. Its speed was as fast as the wind and as fast as lightning. Its speed was extremely fast. In just a short while, the people on the official road felt as if the sky above their heads was covered by a layer of darkness. It was as if a dark cloud was approaching. Some people raised their heads in confusion and were instantly frightened to the point of collapsing to the ground. Tears almost flowed out of their eyes. How could there be any dark clouds in the sky? Instead, there was a gigantic spiritual beast. That spiritual beast was truly huge. When it spread its wings, it nearly covered the entire sky and earth. The heavy pressure it emitted made one's heart feel as if it was being tightly gripped. What kind of monster was that? The people on the official road were all frightened to the point of crawling on the ground. They were cautious and fearful, afraid that they would anger the monster in the sky and die a violent death. Rumble. The gigantic spirit beast landed in front of the imperial capital city gate, causing a violent gale to blow, causing the guards guarding the gate to be incomparably terrified. The spirit beast was simply too huge. It was like a small mountain. This was a flood dragon. The scales on its body were shining under the baptism of the spring rain. Its two fleshy wings slightly flapped, stirring up a violent wind. Its huge lantern-like eyes turned and locked onto the guards of the city gate. Roar! A dragon's roar was deafening. The people could not help but cover their ears. It was extremely uncomfortable. On the dragon's back, a human with bulging muscles like a small mountain stepped out. The human's eyes were extremely cold, and the hair on his head was very short. However, Each strand of hair stood up like steel needles. Light Wind Empire's imperial city. No matter who it is, I, Xiaoyu, will make you pay for killing my brother. The man's eyes shone brightly, as if he could see through everything and stare directly at the things in the imperial capital. He patted the head of the flood dragon and leaped into the air, landing in front of the imperial city's gate. A jade talisman floated up, and the flood dragon was sucked into it. The man was naked, and his body was incomparably strong. He walked straight towards the imperial capital. One of the young guards was trembling as he tried to stop this dangerous man. However, he was killed by Xiaoyu with a slap. Light Wind Empire. Where's Fong's little store? After Xiaoyu killed the guard, his eyes filled with killing intent swept across the place. He looked at the older guard who was sitting on the ground, trembling in fear. That gaze terrified the guard, and he couldn't help but reveal the location of Bufang's restaurant. Fong's little store was famous in the imperial city, so it was not surprising that the guard knew its location. Xiaoyu coldly snorted. With his hands behind his back, he walked toward the imperial city. His destination was Fong's little store. Bufang sat on a chair, tilting his head as he looked at Xiaolong, whose face was flushed red. He held the heavy kitchen knife in his hand and tossed it up and down. The result of the competition was out. Xiaolong was completely defeated, which was not out of Bufang's expectations. From the fact that Xiaolong came to the store so late in the morning, it could be seen that he had been slacking off a lot. With a casual toss, the heavy kitchen knife landed in front of Xiaolong and slashed at the chopping board, emitting a heavy sound. You don't need to do anything else for today and tomorrow. Just take this kitchen knife and practice your cutting and carving skills. Only when I'm satisfied will it be over. Bufang calmly said. After he finished speaking, he stood up, too lazy to care about Xiaolong's aggrieved expression. Yu Fu sympathetically looked at Xiaolong. They had secretly picked up Bufang's heavy kitchen knife before. Not to mention cutting vegetables, it was already strenuous for them to even swing it. Xiaolong's heart was filled with grief and indignation, but he had no other choice. He had dug a hole for himself, and even if he had to hold back his tears, he still had to jump into it. Bufang walked into the store, and Fatty Jean and the others rushed over. Ouyang Xiaoyi also cheerfully ran into the store. Honorbu, good morning. Long time no see. Fatty Jin's eyes lit up, and he laughed heartily at Bufang. His army of fatties also rushed into the store. Ouyang Xiaoyi had already familiarly started to collect the dishes they had ordered, and after she was done, she reported it to Bufang. Bufang also greeted the fatties, nodded his head, and returned to the kitchen. He began to cook. After a short while, the aroma of the dishes drifted out of the kitchen. While Bufang was cooking, Yu Fu respectfully stood at the side, quietly learning from him. Xiaolong, on the other hand, was more sullen. He held the heavy kitchen knife with both hands, and his pale face became like a monkey's butt. That kitchen knife was really too heavy. Thus, the store resumed its daily business. The slightly plump elder from yesterday came again. Early in the morning, he couldn't wait to taste that delicacy again. That dragon liver popsicle really made him unable to extricate himself from it. The elder's dish was quickly carried out. The cube, which seemed to be inlaid with resplendent diamonds, made the customers exclaim in admiration once again. A series of footsteps came from outside the alleyway, and a figure that seemed to have experienced the vicissitudes of life stepped into the store. Ji Qingshue's face was filled with exhaustion. He was wearing a white brocade robe, simple and natural. Your Majesty? Ouyang Xiaoyi was the first to see Ji Qingxue, and she was immediately surprised. Ji Qingxue was a busy person, and he actually had the time to come to the store for a meal. Ji Qingxue rubbed Ouyang Xiaoyi's head, let out a breath, and found a seat in the store to sit down. Give me a jar of ice-hard jade urn wine, and also a bowl of fish head tofu soup, Ji Qingxue gently said. At this moment, he didn't seem like a dignified emperor, but more like a customer who was purely here to taste the delicacies. After Ouyang Xiaoyi left, Ji Qingshue's eyes became a little empty. The environment of the store made him feel somewhat satisfied, and he still felt comfortable here. In the current light wind empire, there were too many vexing matters that worried him. Every day, there would be an unending stream of urgent reports, and none of them contained any good news. Every city was threatened by spirit beasts, and the citizens were a little panicked. Even in areas far away from the imperial city, some restless people directly occupied large cities and proclaimed themselves kings. Within a short period of time, chaos began to appear within the Light Wind Empire. At this time, coupled with the news of Lian Fu's death, Ji Qingxue was truly mentally and physically exhausted. When the Ice Heart Jade Urn wine arrived, Bufang grabbed the wine jar and walked out. He sat in front of Ji Qingxue and poured a cup for him. Chief Eunuch Lian is dead. Ji Qingxue drank the wine in his cup in one gulp and fiddled with the wine cup. A bitter smile appeared on his face as he lightly said. Bufang was startled. Chief Eunuch Lian, was he that 7th grade battle saint eunuch who liked to pinch his thumb and middle finger? He was dead? That eunuch's cultivation level was very high, and he had always been guarding the imperial palace. Now that he was dead, it was not a small blow to Ji Qingxue or even the entire empire. The current Bufang was no longer the store owner who had just arrived in the Light Wind Empire. Once the delicacy map was open, Bufang might not have a good understanding of the entire continent situation, but he had a good understanding of the Light Wind Empire's territory, or rather the southern region. In the southern region, the Light Wind Empire was not a major power, and a battle saint was already an extremely important resource for the empire. Bufang did not know how to comfort Ji Qingxue. Even though Lian Fu was stripped a few times when he came to the store, Bufang did not dislike the eunuch too much. That old eunuch was actually a rather amusing person. My condolences. Bufang also felt an indescribable sadness. He said in a heavy tone as he poured a cup of wine for Ji Qingxue and himself, then drank it in one gulp. Just as Bufang's cup was placed on the table, a trembling sound rang out in the alleyway, followed by a loud whistling sound. A steel spear was shot from afar and directly smashed into the ground of the alleyway, smashing the recently repaired floor into smithereens. The diners in the store were all startled one after another. Bufang was startled and frowned. He could only hear the sound of the steel spear being pulled out from the ground. "Where's the owner of the store? Since you dare to kill my brother, then come and accept your death obediently." An ice-cold voice reverberated, carrying with it a strong, killing intent as it approached the interior of the store. Chapter 273. A huge tremor spread out in all directions along with a wave of ripples. A tyrannical voice resounded as it bellowed toward the store. Bufang was taken aback. Did someone come to the store to cause trouble again? After the previous incident, there was actually someone foolish enough to come to the store to cause trouble? Ji Qingxue was also taken aback. Not only him, but everyone in the store was also taken aback. As customers, they were the clearest about how powerful and terrifying Owner Boo's store was. That was because the small alleyway in front of the store that had just been repaired was stained with the blood of countless experts. Those were the blood of people who did not know what was good for them. They had always thought that no one in this world would come to Owner Boo's store to cause trouble. However, they did not expect that someone would come knocking on their door in such a short time. After experiencing the initial shock, Bufang became much calmer. He stood up and slowly walked toward the entrance. After the thick smoke dispersed, a figure the size of a small hill appeared. Looking at this figure, Bufang was slightly taken aback. He felt that this figure was somewhat familiar. Among the experts that Xiao Bai had killed, there seemed to be one that looked very similar to this person in front of him. With a wave of the steel spear, the smoke and dust that enveloped the alleyway dispersed, revealing a figure. The muscles on this figure were densely packed like a horned dragon, constantly pulsing and emitting a surging aura. His eyes stared at Bufang, who had appeared at the entrance. The corners of his mouth curled up as he fiercely waved his spear, bringing along a gust of wind as he pointed it at Bufang. "You're the owner of the store? Are you the one who killed my younger brother? His voice was like thunder, rumbling and rumbling. The gust of wind whistled and crashed into the store. However, the store was protected by the system. The person's aura did not even reach Bufang before dispersing. However, that oppressive feeling made Bufang's heart skip a beat. The oppressive feeling that the person before him gave Bufang was the strongest he had ever felt. Even the aura of an 8th grade war god was not as frightening as the one before him. Xia Yu's eyes narrowed. He didn't expect Bufang to be so calm under his aura. How was that possible? Although he wasn't a sovereign, he had already taken a step into the sovereign realm. His true chi cultivation was still at the half-step sovereign realm, but his physical body had already reached the level of a sovereign realm. His fighting prowess was comparable to a genuine 9th grade sovereign. Even if he encountered those old monsters in the wildlands, he could still put up a good fight. The aura he emitted was not something an ordinary person could resist. Moreover, the young man in front of him was only a combat emperor. War emperor. In front of him, battle emperors were just ants that he could kill with a wave of his hand. Who is your brother? Bufang expressionlessly looked at the burly man and coldly said. The moment the other party appeared, he wanted him to die. Naturally, Bufang didn't have a good attitude toward him. Bufang's expression enraged Xiaoyu. He immediately took a step forward and the entire ground cracked. You killed my brother, and you still don't remember who he is. Blackie, who was lying on the side, immediately raised its doggy eyes and glanced at the burly man. Its doggy mouth twitched, and it was a little displeased. Buzz Xiaobai's huge body had already appeared behind Bufang. The red glow in its mechanical eyes stared at Xiaoyu and constantly flickered. Xiaoyu stood up as well. Ji Qingxue also stood up. Many of the customers looked at them with a solemn expression. Since you don't want to come out, then I will destroy your store today. Let's see how you're going to continue doing business. The corners of Xiaoyu's mouth curled up into a cold smile. His body suddenly leaped up dozens of meters high and floated in the air. Xiaoyu raised his hand. Suddenly, a monstrous amount of true energy surged out from his energy center and turned into a sky full of energy. It gathered into a giant palm made of true energy. The vein patterns on the palm were extremely conspicuous. The customers in the store were instantly frightened. They had never seen such a scene. A palm made of true energy condensed out of thin air. Even a 7th grade battle saint couldn't do this. Could it be that the person in front of them was an 8th grade war god? Oh my god, a war god expert. Bufang's face was cold as he coldly stared at Xiaoyu in the air. The latter's eyes were filled with ridicule and confidence. He casually slapped the store. He knew there was a supreme beast in the store, but he wasn't afraid. Even if it was a real supreme beast, he would still dare to fight it. The godly temple of the wildlands, the great elder of the godly temple of the ferocious temple, had an invincible physique and feared nothing. A violent wind whistled, bringing with it a frightening pressure. This aura caused the hearts of the customers in the store to tremble and their faces to reveal expressions of fear. The true energy palm that blotted out the sky seemed to be able to crush their minds. It was simply terrifying. Ji Qingshue's heart also trembled. However, as the emperor of the empire, he still maintained his composure. There was a strange glint in the depths of his eyes. This was a true expert. This was a true expert. If the empire had such an expert, then there would be no need to fear those demons and monsters. Ji Qingxue took a deep breath. He had never yearned for an expert as much as he did at that moment. In the past, he had always thought that a 7th grade battle saint was the pinnacle. However, after meeting Onerbu and these experts, he finally understood how low his previous horizons, no, even Emperor Chongfeng's horizons were. A true expert was beyond their imagination. Sensing killing intent toward the host. Purple Eye mode activate. Rumble. The giant palm fiercely slammed down, as if it wanted to turn the store into ashes with a single slap. Blackie slowly stood up from the ground. He was annoyed. Why was there always a bunch of Tom, Dick, and Harry looking for death? Couldn't they just let a dog enjoy its sweet and sour ribs in peace? However, Blackhead didn't make a move. Before he did, a white figure dashed out and soared into the sky. A violent tremor suddenly spread in all directions. The muscles on Xiaoyu's face trembled. His eyes were filled with coldness. Even though there were many people in the store, even though the store was surrounded by innocent people, so what? He would let these people accompany his brother to the grave. A palm slammed down. However, Xiaoyu's pupils abruptly shrank. He felt a wave of resistance that blocked his palm that was about to destroy the entire region. The palm made of true energy was continuously being destroyed by the terrifying attack. Is the Supreme Beast making a move? Come on, let me witness the strength of a Supreme Beast. Xiaoyu roared and laughed loudly. His eyes were filled with coldness. The one who killed his brother was definitely this Supreme Beast. Otherwise, how could the store owner, who was only at the 6th grade, be a match for his 8th grade brother, Xiada? Bang! The true energy palm was destroyed and dissipated in the air, turning into a monstrous gale. In Xiaoyu's eyes, a purple ray of light shot up to the sky and headed straight for him. He gripped the steel spear tightly, and the muscles in his hand bulged. He threw the spear at the purple figure that was rushing toward him. The speed of the spear was so fast that it was shocking. Outside the Imperial City, Sheng Mu clasped his hands behind his back and looked at the majestic light-wind Imperial City. Behind him were two figures. They were also experts from the godly temple of the Wildlands. He was a little afraid of the Imperial City. Although he wanted to see the Imperial City destroyed with his own eyes, he knew that since the great Elder Xiaoyu had made a move, the store would definitely be destroyed. So what if there was a Supreme Beast? The great Elder of the godly temple was a terrifying existence that had reached the level of a supreme being with his physical body. Destroying a store was a piece of cake for him. Ring, ring, ring. A swaying sound rang out. Sheng Mu's eyes suddenly shrank. He looked up into the sky and realized that there was a flaming bird that was burning with flames flying across the sky. On top of the flaming bird, there seemed to be a chubby old man sitting cross-legged. The aura of the flaming bird was so terrifying that it made Sheng Mu's heart tremble. How could there be such an existence in the light-wind Imperial City? That's right, the chubby old man in the sky was the one who had finished the dragon liver popsicle in Fong Fong's little store. He naturally felt the terrifying fluctuation coming from the Imperial City, but he didn't care. Owner Boo's store had a supreme beast, right? It wouldn't be that easy for it to be destroyed. The chubby old man smiled honestly and removed the lid of the gourd. He took a sip of the 8 spirit fruit vinegar and smacked his lips. It would taste better if I mixed the dragon liver with it. When I return to the 100,000 mountains, I'll catch a flood dragon and try it out. If I can figure it out, I'll sell it to those old guys in the tower. I'll make a big profit. In the sky, the chubby old man's sinister laughter suddenly dissipated. Within the Imperial City, a loud explosion rang out, and the entire Imperial City seemed to tremble. Chapter 274. The Imperial City's Shao Manor. A surging aura soared into the sky, as if a long sword was about to split the sky apart, blooming with boundless might. An invisible phantom of a giant sword condensed above the Shao Manor. Light circulated around it as monstrous spirit energy converged toward it, transforming into a vast and unceasingly spiraling spirit energy vortex. The complexion of Xiao Meng, who was seriously reading the secret letter in the study room, suddenly changed. Then, he became overjoyed and instantly rushed out of the study room. He arrived at the center of the Shao Manor and looked toward the secret chamber with joy circulating in his eyes. Did I make a breakthrough? Xiao Meng was slightly excited. With a long whistle, the sharp sword energy scattered in all directions and descended as if it wanted to split the sky apart. With a crashing sound, the door of the secret chamber was immediately opened and a tall figure stepped out from within. The person was like a blade and the sword was like a rainbow. Xiao Yu's entire temperament underwent a huge change. His hair was like a long sword dancing in the wind, tearing through the air. His eyes were filled with sharpness. It was a sharpness that pressed forward with an indomitable will and could cut through everything. "Father, I made a breakthrough." Looking at Xiao Meng, Xiao Yu grinned. His hoarse voice reverberated throughout the entire Xiao manor. Then, behind Xiao Yu, a long sword that seemed to be able to split the sky whizzed out. Xiao Yu rode on the sword and headed straight for Xiao Meng. Xiao Meng immediately burst into laughter as he stood proudly in the sky. He waved his fist and mobilized his true energy, causing a huge collision with Xiao Yu's sword. The sword of a swordsman pressed forward with an indomitable will and was invincible. This was the common understanding of cultivators. A swordsman at the level of a 7th grade battle saint was a terrifying existence. And now, Xiao Yu had finally become a battle saint. A family with 2 battle saints. This was the fortune of the Xiao family, the fortune of the empire. Boom! However, the joy on Xiao Yu and Xiao Meng's faces did not last for long. An extremely terrifying aura suddenly exploded within the imperial city. As the aura swept toward them, the complexions of both of them greatly changed, and they felt a great pressure on their hearts. The father and son looked at each other, and both looked toward the direction of the imperial city. That was where Fong Fong's little store was located. Owner Bu's store caused trouble again. A steel spear that flickered with a cold metallic light almost tore through the air. The spear was ignited with a fiery brilliance and patterns. That aura was simply too terrifying. A 7th grade battle saint might not even have the chance to retaliate before being pierced through by this spear. A beam of purple light streaked across the void. Then, a blade light collided with the spear, causing a huge explosion. Clang! A loud sound reverberated through the air, causing the customers in the store to cover their ears involuntarily. The sound was so loud that it almost shattered their eardrums. Xiao Bai's purple eyes flickered with a cold glint. His body spun in the air like a ball spinning at high speed and landed on the ground with a loud bang. Then, with a frightening jumping force, his entire body shot up once again. His arm had already turned into a large machete. The machete emitted a cold light that was incomparably terrifying. The steel spear spun in the air and finally flew back into Xiao Yu's hand. His bulging, muscular arm held onto the spear, and his aura was like a dragon. His eyes emitted an extreme radiance, and he felt somewhat incredulous. With a long howl, he shot down like a cannonball toward Xiao Bai, who was charging toward him. The spear slashed down, tearing through the air and emitting crashing sounds. Bang, bang, bang. Whitey and Xiao Yu collided in the air, and in an instant, they were entangled together. One man and one machine, both extremely large in size. The long spear and the machete continuously bombarded each other, causing sparks to fly between the friction. Xiao Yu's face was filled with malevolence, and he was incomparably berserk. Spear after spear poured down like a torrential storm. Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes flickered with an awe-inspiring purple light. The machete was also constantly bombarding and colliding with the spear. The people below all sucked in a breath of cold air and felt an extreme pressure in their hearts. What kind of level of battle was this? Even the people watching the battle felt a wave of fear and trepidation. Bufong leaned against the door. The strong wind from the battle between the 2 people in the sky blew at his jet-black hair. He stared at the battle with light circulating in his eyes. He was calm and excited at the same time. Blackie, on the other hand, walked on the ground with cat-like steps for a while. Then it looked at the battle in the sky with interest. Even though the human had not reached the realm of 9th grade supreme being, his physical body had indeed reached that level. His actual battle prowess was no weaker than that of a 9th grade supreme being. In the end, the store still provoked such an existence. But so what? Lord Ghost snorted and did not take it to heart. With a loud bang, a figure was ruthlessly smashed down from the sky and crashed into the long street of the Imperial City. The entire street's surface was shattered with a loud bang, and a deep depression was formed. Fortunately, the location of the alleyway was quite remote, and there were very few vendors setting up stalls. Even if there were, they had long since left this area. Amidst the smoke and dust, Xiao Bai's purple eyes flickered. He crawled up from the ruins, and the crashing sound of bricks and stones on the ground rose and fell. All of a sudden, Xiao Bai's purple eyes brightened. In the air, Xiaoyu, who was standing proudly in the sky, touched the knife scar on his majestic body and grinned. His face was filled with excitement. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. From the ruins on the ground, two ear-piercing sounds rang out. Then, Xiaoyu's pupils shrank as he saw two frightening flying knives tearing through the air. Clang, clang. Xiaoyu gripped his steel spear and swept it across fiercely, sweeping away the flying knives. However, the flying knives were still controlled and slashed towards Xiaoyu. The frightening power of the flying knives made Xiaoyu not dare to use his physical body to resist them. He knew that the power of the flying knives could really break his body. Even though he did not know whether the thing in front of him was the so-called supreme beast, there was no doubt that this fellow's battle prowess was extremely terrifying. Even though this thing did not emit any true energy aura, he still did not dare to underestimate it. Die for me, Xiaoyu angrily roared. He used his spear to deflect the two flying knives. Then his entire body fell down like a cannonball. With a loud bang, he collided with Xiao Bai, who was on the ground, and once again engaged in a hand-to-hand fight. Xiaoyu was a body cultivator. He was good at fighting with his physical body. In this aspect, he was somewhat similar to Xiao Bai. Therefore, when a man and a puppet fought, it was a ghastly sight, causing people's hearts to palpitate. This part of the imperial city's long street was completely destroyed. Sand and stones flew everywhere, and a layer of the ground was wiped off. The surrounding residences were bombarded by the rapidly moving sand and stones. The commotion caused by these two people's battle was extremely great. The two of them fought from the long street to the alleyway, and from the alleyway to the long street. They went back and forth, exchanging blows. The guards of the imperial city had already sealed off the surroundings, forbidding ordinary citizens from approaching. Xiao Yu and Xiao Meng also rushed over. They stood far away and watched the battle. Their hearts couldn't help but tighten. The strength of these two people was too terrifying, completely beyond their imagination. Xiao Yu was very strong. With just his physical body, he could fight against the supreme being. In the godly temple of the wildlands, his position was not low. He was the great elder of the godly temple of the wildlands. The godly temple specialized in cultivating the physical body, so his physical body was extremely terrifying. Xiao Bai did not have true energy. However, ever since he started guarding the store, he had ripped off countless people's clothes. This was the first time he met a strong opponent, and they were actually fighting to such an extent. Bufang's eyes flickered. He was extremely surprised. It seemed like the enemy this time was not to be underestimated. He could even feel that Xiao Bai's fighting methods were getting fiercer and fiercer. Boom! A loud sound rang out. The two of them suddenly shot backwards, plowing a long and narrow ravine on the ground. Xiaoyu's chest was violently gasping for breath. His body was covered with saber wounds, and a faint trace of blood was spreading from them. The frequency at which Xiao Bai's purple eyes flickered was beyond imagination. His chubby body was covered with fist marks and spear marks. It was obvious that the battle was not easy. However, compared to Xiaoyu, Xiao Bai had a big advantage, and that was that he did not know fatigue. Xiaoyu, on the other hand, had a human body. Eventually, he would be tired and his condition would decline. Therefore, Xiaoyu knew that he could not continue like this. Otherwise, he would be tortured to death by this puppet. He threw up a jade talisman in his hand. Suddenly, the jade talisman shone brightly in the air, and a huge figure that covered the sky suddenly appeared in the air. A loud and clear dragon roar resounded through the 9 heavens and spread throughout the entire imperial city. The huge pressure of a flood dragon caused the entire light wind imperial city to sink into panic. Ha ha! Your plaything is very strong. I, Xiaoyu, admit that I can't do anything to you. However, if I keep you occupied, what other tricks do you have? If my lord brother wants to destroy this store, it will be a piece of cake. Those who kill my brother, I will make you pay with your life. Xiaoyu held onto his long spear and pointed it forward. The pressure whistled out as he laughed incessantly. His eyes were filled with malevolence and self-confidence. In the sky behind him, there was a ferocious peak 8th grade spirit beast with huge spikes extending out. It was the savage flood dragon. Chapter 275. Although the flood dragon was not a true dragon, its body still contained the bloodline of a dragon. Thus, it was considered one of the best among the spirit beasts. Its dark scales glinted with a cold glint. As the flood dragon flapped its wings, it stirred up tens of thousands of wind and waves. It opened its mouth and let out a deafening roar. The appearance of the flood dragon was actually a huge lizard with wings. It was very different from a true dragon. However, even so, the flood dragon was still a spirit beast that stood at the top of the food chain. The deafening roar of the dragon resounded throughout the entire imperial city. The citizens of the imperial city trembled at the sound of the dragon's roar. They slumped to the ground and looked at the huge creature in the sky in fear. In their hearts, the appearance of such a terrifying creature in the imperial city was like the end of the imperial city. Bufang looked at the huge flood dragon, and his eyes slightly lit up. An indescribable feeling of excitement emerged in his heart. This huge lizard, was it a freaking flood dragon? He heard that the liver of a flood dragon was very delicious. Xiaoyu tightly held the steel spear in his hand and pointed it at Xiaobai. His eyes were filled with excitement and fanaticism as he looked toward the store. Lord brother, flatten that store for me. Xiaoyu's eyes suddenly widened and he let out a loud roar. Then, the steel spear in his hand was ruthlessly thrown out. It whistled through the air and smashed toward Xiaobai with a burst of sonic booms. Xiaoyu's entire body also moved in an instant. He suddenly shot out and crushed the ground once again. Xiaobai's eyes flickered. He swung out his machete arm with a swoosh, bringing along a wave of air as he charged toward Xiaoyu. Ding! With a crisp sound, the steel spear that was smashing toward him was sent flying by Xiaobai. It spun in the air and fell back into Xiaoyu's hand. The muscles on his arm suddenly bulged, and Xiaoyu thrust out his spear once again. The two of them seemed to have turned into black shadows as they entangled with each other and started another great battle. However, it was obvious that everyone could see that Xiaoyu's condition was deteriorating. After all, he was a human and could not maintain a high-intensity battle state for a long time. This was also the reason why he summoned the flood dragon. With him holding up this thing that was suspected to be a supreme beast that could fight with him, what else did the rest of them have to fear? Under Tyrant's dragon power and Tyrant's dragon breath, everything was nothing more than ashes. Thinking of this, Xiaoyu could not help but burst into a heroic spirit. He laughed out loud, and the movements of his hands became even more terrifying. Every punch was as powerful as Mount Tai. However, if Xiaoyu saw the expressions of the people in the store at this moment, he would definitely notice many clues. That was because none of the customers in the store, including Owner Boo, felt the slightest bit of fear or alarm when facing this terrifying peak of the 8th grade savage flood dragon. Even though many of them felt a little pressured by the dragon's might, there was no fear in their eyes. Instead, there was a pondering and strange look on their faces. The scarlet lantern-like eyes of the flood dragon turned, and its gaze fell on the store. As an 8th grade spirit beast, its spiritual wisdom had already been unlocked. It and Xiaoyu were already partners, so it understood Xiaoyu's intentions. Destroying a small store was a piece of cake for a grade 8 flood dragon. Even if it was to push a small mountain aside, it would not be a difficult matter. The flood dragon extended its neck and let out a fierce roar at the store. The roar of the dragon immediately spread out like a ripple and pressed down on the store below. Bang! A dark red flame rose from the mouth of the flood dragon, and it seemed as if it was roasting the void. This was the dragon breath of the flood dragon, an innate skill of the dragon race. Bang bang! The flames dispersed as if it was trying to suppress them. Then, A trace of cruelty appeared in the lantern-like eyes of the flood dragon. It fiercely spat out a mouthful of burning, dark red dragon breath toward the store below like a waterfall. The scorching dragon breath seemed to be able to burn everything. Facing the dragon breath that blotted out the sky like a long river, the diners below could not maintain their composure. Many of them were so frightened that they fell to the ground on their buttocks, drenched in cold sweat. Ji Qingxue was an emperor after all, so he was able to remain calm. However, his face had become deathly pale and devoid of any color. The dark red dragon breath seemed to have completely filled his eyes, making him feel insignificant and petty. All kinds of feelings of helplessness that he had felt since becoming an emperor surged into his heart. Whether it was Zhao Masheng, who caused a disturbance at the funeral of the great emperor, or the numerous 7th-grade battle saints, and even 8th-grade war gods who spread the news about the Five Stripes Path Understanding fruit, these experts that he had rarely come into contact with in the past appeared one after another. It made him see the world clearly. The experts were still the supreme ones. The dragon breath surged forth and rolled up thousands of waves. Many of the buildings around the store were directly burned and destroyed in a day. You foolish lizard, don't spit your saliva at the Lord Go. Swallow it back. Just as the dark red dragon breath was about to bombard the store, a gentle male voice with a hint of exasperation resounded. Then, in front of the store, the inconspicuous and insignificant big black dog, who was walking with cat-like steps, glared at the dragon breath that filled the sky. The dog's mouth suddenly enlarged, and a deafening dog bark came from the Lord Go's mouth, accompanied by a monstrous wave of wind. The crowd was instantly dumbfounded. Ouyang Xiaoi, who was hiding behind Bufang, was excitedly staring at Blackie with a flushed face. Blackie finally made his move. A dog bark resounded mightily. Compared to the deafening dragon roar, it seemed somewhat comical. However, the scene that shocked the crowd only appeared in the next instant. The dragon breath that was spat out, which seemed as if it could destroy the heaven and earth, was actually retracted after the dog bark. Like a waterfall flowing backward, it sprayed toward the flood dragon and hit its own face. In the air, the huge flood dragon was hit by its own dragon breath. It immediately flapped its fleshy wings and clawed at the air with its claws. The dragon roar resounded unceasingly. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. A faint smell of barbecued meat permeated the air. This smell was slightly scorched and carried a slight stench. When the dragon breath dissipated, the savage look in the eyes of the huge flood dragon became even more intense. Its head was almost burnt to a crisp, and many of its scales fell off due to the heat. Being sprayed by his own dragon's breath, this was such a shameful thing. Were these damned humans mocking this Lord Dragon? All of them had to die. All of them had to die. The flood dragon was enraged. With a flap of its wings, it dashed toward the store. Since the dragon breath couldn't destroy it, then this dragon would directly trample the store to pieces. This flood dragon was like a small mountain. It could even destroy mountains, so how could it not destroy a small restaurant? On the other side, the battle between Xia Yu and Xiao Bai was once again in a stalemate. Rumbling sounds resounded unceasingly, and sparks flew everywhere. The clanging sounds reverberated in the ears of the crowd. However, compared to the battle between the two, the huge body of the flood dragon that was like a small mountain was more oppressive and shocking to the eyes. Roar! The dragon throne spread out, and the wind whistled. The eyes of the flood dragon were filled with cruelty. Destroy it. The ugly face of the flood dragon was getting closer and closer. The crowd could even smell the smell of the dragon's charred meat. The diners who couldn't bear it were already so scared that their hearts were in their throats. They subconsciously closed their eyes. However, after waiting for a long time, they didn't hear the sound of the flood dragon crashing down. The wind whistled and blew Bufang's hair. Bufang, who was leaning against the door, was calm and composed. Remember to leave the corpse intact. An 8th-grade dragon's liver is very valuable. The dragon's meat should taste good as well. Bufang looked at the sky, and the corners of his mouth curled up as he calmly said. The crowd was stunned. They raised their heads and looked at the sky with their eyes wide open. In the sky, the enormous body of the flood dragon suddenly came to a halt, unable to move at all. In front of the flood dragon's head was a tiny figure. Compared to the huge body of the flood dragon, that figure was like a black dot. Blackie floated in the air, raising its exquisite dog paw and placing it in front of the huge, savage flood dragon. Its dog eyes seemed to be filled with a trace of joy. Lord Go grinned, revealing his white teeth. He stuck out his tongue. "Why do you want the dragon's liver? The sweet and sour dragon ribs are obviously the best delicacy." Chapter 276. The barbaric flood dragon's body stiffened in the air. It rolled its huge eyeballs toward its nose and saw a black dog blocking its nose. The black dog was as tiny as a fly in front of the barbaric flood dragon. Even the flood dragon's eyes were larger than the black dog. Roar! The barbaric flood dragon was enraged. White mist gushed out of its nostrils, and it bared its ferocious fangs, which emitted a cold glint. The massive wings on the flood dragon's back flapped fiercely, sweeping up a myriad of wild gales. A massive force pushed its body forward, wanting to crush the tiny black dog. However, no matter how hard the flood dragon flapped its wings, it couldn't move forward. The black dog in front of it was like a majestic mountain, and it couldn't budge an inch. Noisy, Blackie's ears twitched, and it opened its mouth in dissatisfaction. The huge lizard was constantly roaring, and its ears were filled with the flood dragon's roars. "Don't you know that your roars are very unpleasant?" Blackie harumphed. Then it used its dainty and exquisite paw to push the flood dragon's huge body away, causing it to tremble and be pushed far away. Blackie squinted its eyes, and its dainty and exquisite paw expanded dramatically. In an instant, it became even bigger than the dragon's head. A huge pressure instantly burst out, enveloping the flood dragon. It was a pressure that made the flood dragon tremble. The flood dragon, which was originally incomparably ferocious and felt that it was a supreme existence, was instantly frightened by this pressure. Its body, which was about to fly into a rage, froze on the spot. Then, the fluttering paw swatted down and ruthlessly smashed the dragon's head. The huge dragon's head was smashed into the ground with a loud rumble, and the long street of the imperial city was smashed into pieces. The flood dragon felt a sharp pain, and it pulled its head out from the ground. Immediately, the scattered bricks and stones fell to the ground. Roar! The flood dragon let out another furious roar. Bang! Naturally, Xiaohei responded with another slap. This slap directly slammed the flood dragon's head into the ground, stirring up a strong gust of wind. The black dog paw in the air shrank back to its original size. Then, Blackie strode across the sky with its graceful cat-like steps and slowly arrived above the wild flood dragon. It wrinkled its nose lazily and snorted. Poochie! Xiaoyu was slashed by Xiao Bai's saber on his back. Immediately, blood spurted out. Xiaoyu was sent flying like a cannonball, crashing into the wall and turning it into ruins. Xiao Bai's purple eyes flickered. He landed on the ground like a rock. Xiaoyu walked out of the ruins. His chest was violently panting. He had suffered a great loss. This was the first time in his life that he had suffered such a great loss. He looked in the direction of Lord Brother. His eyes narrowed, and he sucked in a breath of cold air. He thought that Lord Brother should have already razed the store to the ground. After all, there was a violent fluctuation coming from that direction just now. The degree of that fluctuation was even more violent than razing the store. But at this moment, in his eyes, Lord Brother, who was at the peak of the 8th grade, was actually beaten to the ground. He didn't even dare to move. How is this possible? Xia Yu's eyes narrowed, and he cried out involuntarily. Lord Brother, who didn't even fear a supreme beast, was now in such a sorry state. Xia Yu panicked for the first time. Didn't they say that there was only one supreme beast in this store? What was happening in front of his eyes? He had already exerted all his strength to hold back a supreme beast. What the hell was going on over at Lord Brother's side? Xiao Bai's purple eyes flickered. He waved his saber and pointed it at Xiaoyu. His figure once again burst out. Xiaoyu clenched his teeth. To be able to beat Lord Brother to the ground, there must be another, even more powerful supreme beast in this store. This was simply too frightening. What exactly was the origin of this store? After blocking Xiao Bai's attack with his spear, Xiaoyu let out a long roar. His body was suddenly covered with a true energy armor. He couldn't continue fighting with Xiao Bai like this. With a thrust of his spear, thousands of spear shadows whizzed out. It was as if they had transformed into a hurricane, suddenly forcing Xiao Bai to retreat. Xiaoyu took out a jade talisman and fearfully waved it in the direction of Lord Brother. Looking at Lord Brother's state, it was obvious that he had been beaten senseless. He had to quickly withdraw it into the beast taming talisman. Otherwise, Lord Brother might fall here. A peak of the 8th grade Flood Dragon Spirit Beast was too precious. Blackish strutted its cat-like steps and stood on the head of the savage Flood Dragon. Suddenly, it sensed a peculiar fluctuation emerging from the body of the Flood Dragon, as if it wanted to suck the Flood Dragon away. Oomph! Blackie glanced at Xiaoyu, who was holding the jade talisman in the distance, and coldly snorted. Then, it lifted its leg and ruthlessly stomped on the dragon's head. Buzz crack! Xiaoyu's complexion shrank. Suddenly, he felt a piercing pain in his brain. Then, blood trickled down from the corner of his mouth. His figure staggered 2 steps back. Xiao Bai whizzed over. Its purple eyes flickered, and it slashed out with its blade. It almost cut Xiaoyu in half at the waist. Blood gushed out and splattered all over the sky. Xiaoyu let out a miserable howl. The beast taming talisman in his hand had long been broken into pieces. This time, he was really frightened. Looking at the black dog that was walking back and forth on the Flood Dragon's head with cat-like steps, his mind trembled. What kind of dog was that? The Flood Dragon's head was like a balloon that had been stepped on. It deflated in an instant. It was almost stomped on by the black dog. Dragon blood flowed out from the Flood Dragon's mouth. Although its head did not explode, its life force had long been gone. Black's pawn not only shattered the beast taming talisman, but also shattered the spirit array in the depths of the Flood Dragon's brain. The inside of the Flood Dragon's brain had long been turned into a pile of mud. If Bufong did not say that he would leave the corpse intact, Blackie would have stomped on this giant lizard's head long ago. Lord Ghost snorted. He had never been interested in giant lizards that boasted of themselves as dragons. Therefore, he did not show any mercy to this giant lizard that dared to act tough in front of him. Xiaoyu's mind trembled. He felt a pang of pain in his heart. Relying on this peak 8th grade Flood Dragon, his status in the godly temple of the Wildlands was not low. If he lost this Flood Dragon, his status would definitely drop by a lot. Damn it! Damn it! Xiaoyu's mountain-like body trembled unceasingly. His eyes were filled with a strong sense of unwillingness. With a long howl, his fist collided with Xiao Bai's. He did not hold back in this punch, and unexpectedly, the careless Xiao Bai was sent flying. After taking a deep look at the Flood Dragon's corpse, Xiaoyu did not hesitate in the slightest. He turned around, stepped on the air, and dashed away. He wanted to escape. He knew that he had underestimated the store's strength. That unfathomable black dog made him unable to muster up the slightest bit of courage to fight back. That iron puppet seemed to be indestructible. He was truly at his wit's end. Swoosh, swoosh. 2 flying knives whizzed out once again and slashed at his back. Xiaoyu's body was in the air as he spat out a mouthful of blood. His eyes were bloodshot. He grabbed the 2 flying knives and tore them apart. A patch of blood was left on his back. After ruthlessly throwing away the flying knives, he also forcefully threw out the steel spear in his hand. With a thought, the long spear suddenly seemed to be burning with runic flames. It flew straight toward Xiao Bai, who was on the ground, like a burning arrow. Boom! The ground suddenly exploded, setting off monstrous waves. Blackie lazily swept his gaze over Xiaoyu, who was staggering in the air and planning to escape. He did not have the slightest desire to make a move. He was merely an ant. If he escaped, then so be it. As long as there was a source of dragon meat, everything would be fine. However, just as Black had turned its head, Xiaoyu's wanton laughter suddenly resounded in the sky. Then, a sparkling and translucent jade talisman trembled as it floated down from the sky and flew toward the store. On the jade talisman, a peculiar fluctuation suddenly spread out. In an instant, it formed a vast magic array in the sky. Within the magic array, a terrifying destructive energy was brought forth. That energy rapidly crushed toward the store. Xiaoyu's body was covered in blood. His face was filled with madness. Looking at the exploding jade talisman and the flood dragon's corpse, his eyes were filled with pain. If I can't defeat you, I'll just blow you up. This is a spirit talisman drawn by the Hidden Dragon Royal Court's magic array, Supreme Being. Damn it! You killed my little brother and slaughtered my dragon. Then all of you shall die for me. After tossing out the magic array, Xiaoyu no longer hesitated. Without even turning his head back, he explosively dashed toward the outskirts of the Imperial City. He knew that half of the Imperial City would soon be completely turned into ruins. The spirit talisman of the magic array Supreme Being was absolutely as terrifying as a nightmare. Outside the Imperial City, on a vast plain, a group of single-horned spirit beasts covered in scales were galloping at an extremely fast speed. Their speed was extremely fast, and they created a huge yellow line on the vast plain. If one were to look closely, that yellow line was actually the billowing smoke and dust created by the galloping of the single-horned spirit beasts. Behind the single-horned spirit beasts was a carriage. Behind the carriage, there was even a coffin. The surrounding people riding on the single-horned spirit beasts were all experts draped in black robes. Their destination was the majestic Imperial City that was situated in the vast plain. In the sky, an intense sunbird whose entire body was burning with flames was galloping at an extremely fast speed. Its cry resounded in all directions. The chubby elder who was sitting cross-legged on the back of the intense sunbird was suddenly startled. He lowered his head and looked down. He saw the pitch-black and awe-inspiring carriage and the single-horned spirit beasts. The elder was slightly puzzled as he frowned. Suddenly, the galloping group gradually came to a stop. The curtain of the carriage was pulled open and an elderly figure stepped out from within. He stood on the carriage and raised his head to look at the intense sun-bird flying in the sky. The chubby elder was suddenly startled and felt somewhat suspicious. "Venerable sir, we will arrive at the Imperial City of the Light Wind Empire in another half a day," a black-robed expert respectfully said to the elder. The elder indifferently nodded his head. He frowned as he looked at the intense sun-bird flying in the sky and narrowed his eyes. An expert from the clear sky pagoda of the 100,000 mountains. I didn't expect to meet him so soon. Could it be that the surest sex plan was exposed? No, that shouldn't be possible. It might just be a coincidence. Let's go and continue on our journey. According to King Yu's orders, we will send the eunuch's corpse to the Imperial City. I still have to go to the Imperial City of the Light Wind Empire to retrieve a treasure. Chapter 277. A trembling jade talisman hovered in the air like a miniature sun. Scorching heat and frightening fluctuations circulated around the talisman. A gigantic magic array hovered in the sky. Peculiar fluctuations surged forth and rolled toward the store in a grandiose manner. This was an extremely frightening fluctuation, one that caused everyone in the Imperial City to feel despair. It was as if a demon had crawled out of the abyss, intending to devour everyone and amplify the fear in their hearts. Ji Qingxue blankly stared at the miniature sun like jade talisman. Ji Qingxue blankly stared at the jade talisman that resembled a small sun. The light pierced his eyes, causing him to tear up uncontrollably. However, he was unable to control his body at all. As he cried, he took deep breaths. He was suppressed by the frightening aura. The destructive aura that burst forth from the miniature sun caused everyone to feel despair. Even Bufang widened his eyes and took in a deep breath. A talisman drawn by a magic array? Supreme Being? Is that a magic array? What a frightening feeling. Bufong's heart trembled violently. The exploding magic array was like a concentrated bomb exploding in the air. Its destructive power made Bufong apprehensive. Bufong was no stranger to magic arrays. Every time he was teleported by the system, he would step on a teleportation array. However, this exploding magic array made Bufong feel as if he was facing a military bomb from his previous life. It completely refreshed his understanding of magic arrays. Rumble. Ripples spread out from the explosion of the formation. The ripples spread out continuously and set off a strong gust of wind. Blacken narrowed its eyes and swept its gaze across its surroundings. With a snort, it strutted its cat-like steps and floated up from the body of the giant flood dragon. It gracefully and leisurely walked toward the exploding talisman that resembled a miniature sun. The trembling jade talisman approached Blackie, and Blackie leisurely walked towards the jade talisman. A gale arose, causing the fur on Blackie's body to flutter rapidly. Raising its exquisite and small dog paw, Blackie's eyes instantly emitted a white glow. Thereafter, it was as if the entire world had been engulfed and compressed, transforming into a transparent cover that compressed the jade talisman within. The energy on the jade talisman was constantly compressed, and soon it transformed into a crystal ball of light. The light was so intense that no one dared to look at it directly. Blackill lightly patted the glowing jade talisman that had turned into a rubber ball. Its mouth twitched, and then it casually tossed it out. With a pat of its paw, the glowing ball of light transformed into a streak of light that streaked across the sky like a shooting star. With a swoosh, it disappeared without a trace. Bang! In the distance, the crowd seemed to have heard an explosion from a place extremely far away from the Imperial City. The ground trembled slightly, and a fine black smoke rose into the air. Once again landing on the ground, Blackie yawned and walked toward the store. It found a place to lie down and couldn't be bothered with anything else. Everyone in the Imperial City was dumbfounded, and they looked at the Lord Go who was lying on the ground in disbelief. The terrifying might of the spirit talisman was clearly felt by everyone. Many of them thought they were going to die from the explosion of the spirit talisman, but the Lord Go simply swatted away the spirit talisman with a paw. Ji Qingshue's eyes were dull, but his heart suddenly heaved a sigh of relief. Then he felt a sense of happiness, as if he had finally seen the light of day again. However, amidst this happiness, what he felt was a thirst for strength, a thirst for experts. If the Empire could have such a powerful existence overseeing it, would there be a need to fear an 8th-grade war god? The father and son of the Shao family looked at the Lord Go with even more reverence. This was a supreme beast, an invincible supreme beast. In the past, the number of times Blackie made a move could be counted on one hand, but it had never been as shocking as today. Today, they finally understood what a supreme beast was. The sound of light footsteps rang out. Bufong slowly walked out of the store, unperturbed in the face of such a crisis. He came to the side of the giant flood dragon's corpse, patted it, and slightly curled up the corners of his mouth. Then, he opened up the system's storage space and stored the flood dragon's corpse. After doing all this, Bufong contentedly clapped his hands. Then, he turned around to look at the crowd and returned to the store. Today's business will be as usual. Everyone is welcome to come again. Bufong's indifferent voice drifted over, rousing the crowd from their shock. However, at this moment, no one was in the mood to eat. They all bid farewell to Bufong and left. In just a short while, the store became empty. Bufong didn't mind. He glanced at Blackie who was lying in the store, then turned around and stepped into the kitchen. When Ji Qingshui returned to the Imperial Palace, Xiao Yu and Xiao Meng also came to the main hall. Xiao Yu's breakthrough to 7th-grade Battle Saint was originally a good thing for the Empire. However, after personally experiencing the level of battle just now, they couldn't feel the slightest bit happy. In the face of such terrifying battle strength, a 7th-grade battle saint, was simply too weak. The excitement in Xiao Yu's heart after his breakthrough also disappeared, leaving behind only a desire for greater strength. Xiao Yu's body was covered in blood as he quickly fled. His complexion was ashen and his eyes were surging with fear. Terrifying. It was simply too terrifying. That black dog, what kind of existence was it? It could even neutralize the explosion of a Supreme Being's spirit talisman. That was a Supreme Being's spirit talisman. Moreover, it was a Supreme Being's spirit talisman from the Hidden Dragon Royal Court. He only obtained one by chance, and it had always been his trump card. Even a true Supreme Being could be blasted half to death by this spirit talisman, but that black dog. Thinking of this, Xiao Yu's body trembled, and he could no longer muster up the slightest bit of courage. This time, he really suffered a great loss. Not only was he seriously injured and on the verge of death, he even used up his most precious Supreme Being's spirit talisman. The pain caused his entire body to tremble. His figure was like a streak of blood-red light as he swept through the air, speeding toward the outskirts of the Imperial City. Suddenly, his eyes focused, and he looked toward the distant sky. There, he saw billowing smoke and dust rushing toward him. Perhaps they were just people entering the Imperial City. Xiao Yu couldn't be bothered with them. At the moment, his injuries were somewhat serious, and he needed to leave this troublesome place as soon as possible to recuperate. Xiao Yu, who originally didn't want to pay attention to the caravan below, never expected that even though he didn't provoke others, they still wanted to mess with him. The caravan below came to a stop. Then, the sound of a bowstring being released resounded. With a whistling sound, a pitch-black shadow of an arrow was shot out. Its speed was frightening and made one's heart skip a beat. Courting death. Xiao Yu was enraged. This group of reckless fools dared to provoke him. Even though he was seriously injured, he was still the great elder of the ferocious temple and a Supreme Being warrior with a fleshly body. How could he remain indifferent after being provoked like this? With an angry roar, Xiao Yu's body was bathed in blood. He punched downward and compressed the air. With a bang, his fist shot out and collided with the pitch-black arrow. Boom! An explosion occurred in the sky. The curtain of the carriage below was lifted and a figure suddenly shot out from the carriage. He stepped on the air and soared into the sky. I didn't expect that. I would meet a warrior from the godly temple of the ferocious temple here. It seems like you are seriously injured? An indifferent, mocking voice blossomed in the sky. Then, Xiao Yu's pupils shrank as he realized that the pitch-black arrow had broken through the compressed air bomb and was shooting toward him. With a poochie sound, it pierced through him, causing blood to splatter all over the sky. Xiao Yu's eyes revealed a trace of fear. He looked at the hunchbacked elder with a face full of disbelief. His heart felt as if he had just met a dog's death. Half a step to Supreme Being. The hunchbacked elder smiled arrogantly. His eyes suddenly emitted a sharp light. Since I have met you, then don't think of leaving. In the blink of an eye, a black bow appeared in the old man's hand. It was as black as ink and emitted a chilling aura. He pulled the bowstring, and arrows shot out explosively. They brought with them a pressure that made Xiao Yu's breathing stagnate as they whizzed over. Puff, puff, puff. Enduring the pain, Xiao Yu dodged a few arrows. After all, he was seriously injured in the battle with Xiao Bai. He couldn't dodge too many arrows. His body was hit by 3 arrows and blood splattered everywhere. In the end, he was shot down from the sky and nailed to the ground. With a furious roar, Xiao Yu was extremely unwilling to give up. A pitch-black arrow, carrying a trace of hidden flame, pierced into Xiao Yu's head with a bang, nailing him to death while he was still alive. The godly temple of the ferocious temple's great elder, Supreme Being Xiao Yu, was dead. The hunchbacked elder descended from the sky and put away the pitch-black longbow in his hand. He clasped his hands behind his back and walked towards Xiao Yu's corpse. A deep pit was created on the ground, and crushed stones rolled everywhere. The elder bent his waist and coughed a few times. His breathing was unsteady, worthy of the title of Supreme Being Physique. If he wasn't seriously injured, it would be difficult to kill him. The venerable elder chuckled. Then, he raised his hand and started to draw a strange magic array on Xiaoyu's corpse. The corpse of a supreme being physique is too wonderful. The venerable elder's eyes revealed a trace of intoxication. Then, a complicated, blood-colored magic array was formed. The magic array rotated. A roaring phantom image was pulled out from Xiaoyu's corpse. The phantom image of Xiaoyu roared ferociously, but it couldn't make any sound. The elder licked his lips. With trembling hands, he took out a spirit talisman from his robe. With a swoosh, Xiaoyu's soul essence was sucked into the talisman. Sigh, I must quickly retrieve the departed soul orb. I still need this semi-divine tool to preserve the spirit essence. But to think that the Shura's sect's semi-divine tool would be lost in such a small empire. The affairs of the world are truly unpredictable. The venerable master sighed softly. With a wave of his hand, he stored Xiaoyu's corpse away. To the warriors of the Shura sect, the corpse of a supreme being physique warrior was an extremely precious material. It was used to refine puppets. The surrounding black-robed men respectfully looked at the venerable elder who had returned to the carriage. Continue forward. Our destination is the imperial city of the Light Wind Empire. It's time for us to take back what belongs to us. Chapter 278. As night fell, the bustling imperial city returned to its tranquility. In the sky, 2 crescent moons emitted a cold radiance as they sprinkled down, covering the entire land with a thin veil. The streets of the imperial city, which were littered with rubble, became even more desolate under the radiance of the crescent moons. There were not many people in the imperial city. There were only a few workers moving the rubble and repairing the damaged areas. In the kitchen of Fong Fong's little store, Bu Fong narrowed his eyes as he held the dragon bone kitchen knife in his hand. He twirled the knife and cut a plump piece of dragon meat into small pieces. Then, he started a fire and heated up the wok. He activated the surging true energy within his body and cooked the dragon meat in the same way he cooked the sweet and sour ribs. Even though the dragon meat was only the meat of an 8th-grade flood dragon, the fat and flesh of the dragon meat had an indescribable texture and taste due to the nourishment of spirit energy. At the very least, it was an intoxicating taste. Blackie, who was at the side, eagerly stuck out its tongue as it stared at the fragrant sweet and sour ribs that Bufong scooped out of the wok. Dragon meat. That taste was definitely delicious. After Bufong tasted a piece, he couldn't help but be intoxicated by its deliciousness. The texture of the dragon meat was extremely good, with excellent elasticity. Moreover, the meat was extremely plump. When the sweet and sour ribs was placed in front of Blackie, it finally couldn't hold it in any longer. After waiting for an entire night, Blackie started to gobble down the food from the porcelain bowl with gusto. The meat of this giant lizard was the most delicious, and it became even more delicious under Bufong's cooking. Looking at Blackie, who was eating with gusto, the corners of Bufong's mouth curled up. However, he also felt that it was a pity. If there was delicious fruit vinegar at this moment, he could try the dragon liver popsicle made from the liver of an 8th-grade flood dragon. Unfortunately, this delicacy required too much fruit vinegar. Without good fruit vinegar, the dragon liver would be wasted. Bufong felt that he needed to find some time to brew some fruit vinegar. However, this was an arduous task that would take a long time. After practicing the other dishes for a while, Bufong called it a day and returned to his room, preparing to sleep. He needed to maintain his sleep so that he could maintain his condition and be fully focused when cooking. Not long after, the sound of Bufong's even breathing could be heard from Bufong's room. Light Wind Imperial City, Main Hall. Inside the Great Strength Hall, the lights were waning and people were walking around gracefully. Many of the Empire's ministers had gathered here to discuss the country's affairs. The current Light Wind Empire was indeed in a precarious situation, and all the ministers were terrified. As the nobles of the Imperial City, they were naturally aware of the current situation of the Light Wind Empire. The 7 counties were currently in chaos. There were spirit beasts attacking the cities and rebel armies rebelling. This was simply unimaginable to them. No one knew why the empire would become so chaotic in such a short period of time. The new emperor, Ji Qingxue, was not a fatuous ruler. Ever since he ascended to the throne, he had always been cautious and conscientious, managing the affairs of the empire in an orderly manner. There was no reason for such chaos to occur. The father and son of the Shao family sat cross-legged in the main hall, resting with their eyes closed. They turned a blind eye to the ministers who were constantly quarreling around them. Ji Qingxue, who was sitting at the top of the main hall, rubbed his brows. Looking at the ministers below him, he let out a long sigh. Suddenly, dong! A loud noise like the sound of heavy footsteps resounded. Then, a eunuch rushed in from outside the main hall in a panic. Your Majesty, there are people carrying a coffin outside, saying that they want to see your Majesty. The eunuch's face was filled with panic as he spoke in a trembling voice. Carrying a coffin into the imperial palace, who would be so daring? Ji Qingxue abruptly straightened his body. The father and son of the Shao family, who were resting with their eyes closed, also opened their eyes. The atmosphere outside the main hall was somewhat stifling. Then, the sound of heavy footsteps rang out. Several figures slowly walked in from outside the main hall, carrying a pitch-black coffin. A gust of cold wind instantly whistled within the main hall, silencing the ministers who were chattering incessantly. They did not even dare to breathe loudly. For figures, dressed in black robes and wearing black conical bamboo hats, unhurriedly stepped into the main hall. Under the watchful eyes of everyone present, they unhurriedly arrived at the center of the main hall. With a loud rumble, they abruptly placed the coffin on the ground, causing the entire main hall to tremble. Under the orders of King Yu, we have delivered the coffin. A hoarse voice came from one of them. Then, the four of them cupped their hands toward Ji Qingxue, who was sitting on a high seat, as a form of etiquette. Then, they turned around and walked out of the main hall, preparing to leave. Preposterous! Impudent! Xiao Meng's eyes seemed to be shooting out light as he abruptly slammed his palm down. With an angry roar, his entire body sped out and chased after the four people who were preparing to leave the main hall. The guards of the imperial palace also followed behind him. Ji Qingxue ignored Xiao Meng, who was chasing after the four people. Instead, he slowly walked down the main hall with a somewhat sluggish expression and arrived before the coffin. Xiao Yu stepped forward and protected Ji Qingxue in case there was any danger within the coffin. However, after opening the lid of the coffin, there was no danger. The other party was simply here to deliver the coffin. However, when everyone saw the person within the coffin, they all fell silent. The person lying quietly within the coffin was Lien Fu, who was covered in wounds and had several gaping bloody holes in his chest. A dignified 7th-grade battle saint had now turned into a cold corpse. Xiao Yu was silent as he lightly sighed. He also did not know how to comfort Ji Qingxue. As expected, everything was done by King Yu. The death of Chief Eunuch Lien was caused by Ji Qingyu. Xiao Meng, who had chased after the four people, quickly returned. His face was so gloomy that it seemed like it could drip water. After exchanging blows with the four people, he realized that none of them were simple characters. For a moment, he was at his wit's end. The other party did not want to exchange blows with him and insisted on retreating. Feeling helpless, he could only return. Xiao Meng also sighed when he saw Lien Fu's corpse. Give Chief Eunuch Lien's corpse a proper burial. After a long while, the heavy atmosphere in the main hall was finally broken. Ji Qingxue arranged for someone to bring Lien Fu's corpse away. Rumble! A violent tremor rang out, and the entire main hall began to tremble. The faces of the people within the hall were filled with terror as they rushed out of the main hall one after another. The disheveled guards rushed over in panic. Their faces were filled with terror. Your Majesty, the national treasury has been robbed. The lips of the guards were trembling. The national treasury of an empire was actually robbed. To them, this was simply a fantasy. There were at least several thousand guards surrounding the national treasury, but it was still robbed alive. This was a heavy blow to the prestige of the Light Wind Empire. Ji Qingshue's expression immediately changed when he heard this. The current national treasury was the last line of defense for the Light Wind Empire. They could not afford to lose it. The crowd rushed into the national treasury in a panic. The heavily guarded door of the national treasury had actually been smashed open by someone. Even the door was distorted by the impact. The crowd took a deep breath. They were all shocked by this terrifying scene. However, Ji Qingxue quickly came out of the national treasury. He let out a long sigh, and his face was filled with relief. "Your Majesty, what was lost in the national treasury?" Xiao Meng asked with a frown. "All the valuables are still there. However, only one item is missing." Ji Qingxue was somewhat relieved. However, he looked at Xiao Meng with a bitter smile and slowly said, "The item that was lost is the departed soul orb." Departed soul orb? The departed soul orb that was stolen by Zhao Musheng and abandoned in the end. Xiao Meng asked in confusion. Yes. However, this means that the thief could be someone from the sect. After all, the departed soul orb was originally a treasure of the sect. Now that they want to take it back, it's understandable. Ji Qingshue's expression did not look too good. The national treasury of an empire allowed someone to come and go as they pleased. This was a blatant disregard for the prestige of the Light Wind Empire. However, one thing was certain. The person who robbed the national treasury must have a terrifying cultivation level. The departed soul orb is a semi-divine weapon. The person who stole it, what are they planning? Xiao Meng narrowed his eyes. His heart was heavy. Inside the imperial city inn, the Shura sect venerable with a face full of wrinkles played with the palm-sized gray bead in his hand. The bead shone brilliantly in his hand. Its surface was densely covered with mysterious patterns that could not be seen at all. The departed soul orb is finally in my hands. The wrinkles on the venerable's face trembled. He could not help but suppress his laughter. The outskirts of the imperial city were already in chaos. Guards were constantly patrolling the streets. Trembling, the venerable took out a jade talisman. The corner of his mouth twitched, and he immediately crushed it. A roaring phantom soul essence floated out from the jade talisman, baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. The venerable master glanced disdainfully at the soul essence and casually raised the departed soul orb. With a thought, a huge suction force immediately burst forth from the departed soul orb and sucked in Xia Yu's soul essence, who was baring his fangs and brandishing his claws. The eyes of Xia Yu's soul essence were instantly filled with fear, but it quickly disappeared. After absorbing Xia Yu's soul essence, the patterns on the departed soul orb lit up. Then it flickered and black smoke circulated within. I originally wanted to massacre an entire city as a catalyst for the awakening of the departed soul orb. Who would have thought that I would pick up the soul essence of a supreme being with a fleshly body? Even though it's not a true supreme being, it's enough to serve as a catalyst for the awakening of the departed soul orb. The venerable squinted his eyes and laughed. The great revival of the Shura sect is finally about to begin. In the following half a month, everyone in the imperial city was on tenterhooks. However, none of this had anything to do with Bufang. He continued his business as usual, practicing his cutting and carving skills, teaching Yu Fu and Xiaolong new dishes, testing their mastery of the dishes, and so on. In his spare time, he would pull a chair and curl up in front of the store. He would stare at the boundless sky and doze off. Within this half a month, the entire Light Wind Empire had sunk into complete chaos. Wars broke out everywhere. Ji Qingyu led his army on a series of expeditions and had already conquered many of the empire's cities, occupying a large county. This was a painful topic for the emperor. Xiao Meng accepted the order and led the army to crusade against Ji Qingyu. Xiao Yu, on the other hand, stayed behind to guard the imperial city. While the Light Wind Empire was in chaos, the people from the godly temple of the wildlands returned with their tails between their legs. At this moment, their mood was no better than the emperor's. This was because the great elder of the godly temple, Xiaoyu, who had accompanied them to the Light Wind Empire, had fallen. A leader of the godly temple of the wildlands had fallen. This had thrown the godly temple of the wildlands into complete chaos. Amidst the chaos, Bufang, who was curled up in front of his store, opened his drowsy eyes and once again activated a new temporary mission assigned by the system. However, the reward of this mission made Bufang's heart palpitate with excitement. Chapter 279. Temporary Mission. Head to the Western Mystery City and join the army as a cook. During your time in the army, use the available ingredients to cook 3 dishes that are qualified by the system. Mission reward: 10% increase in true energy cultivation and a fragment of the God of Cooking set. As a young man aiming to become the God of Cooking who stands at the top of the food chain in the fantasy world, you must be able to cook absolutely delicious dishes under any kind of difficult conditions. The cultivation of cooking skills is endless. Work hard, young man. As Bufang curled up on a chair in front of the store, the serious voice of the system reverberated in his mind. Bufang's drowsy eyes opened involuntarily like a thin slit. Then they suddenly widened and his eyes shone brightly. Oh, temporary mission? Bufang was taken aback. It had been a long time since he encountered a temporary mission issued by the system. He didn't expect the system to suddenly give him one, which gave him a fright. However, the content of the mission gave him a fright. Join the army and become a cook? Bufang's face was full of confusion as he asked the system in his mind. Wasn't a cook in the army the same as a cook in the army? The system wanted him to go to the army to stir up trouble. Oh no, to cook for the army? Bufang widened his eyes and smacked his lips. To be honest, he was somewhat unwilling. Being a good cook in the army was not an easy task. Not only did he have to keep up with the pace of the army, but he also had to follow the army into battle. He might even have to go to the battlefield. Bufang was extremely unwilling. In his opinion, what did this have to do with becoming the God of Cooking? Wasn't it better to stay in the kitchen and study his new dishes? Why did he have to go to the army and work himself to death? Bufang curled his lips. However, the system's temporary mission reward this time was quite generous. 10% increase in true energy cultivation and a fragment of the God of Cooking set. This reward is quite generous. Bufang was excited as he calculated. A 10% increase in his qi cultivation could save Bufang a lot of time and energy. This was very important to Bufang, who was eager to improve his cultivation, especially the reward of the fragment of the God of Cooking set, which made Bufang's heart burn with passion. Currently, he had already collected 2 fragments of the God of Cooking set. Originally, he thought that he would have to wait until the next system upgrade to obtain this fragment. He did not expect that such a mission would suddenly appear. Bufang curled up on the chair once again. His eyes were somewhat empty as he stared at the sky, calculating in his heart. The sound of footsteps came from the alleyway. The siblings, Xiao Yinyu and Xiao Yu, were slowly approaching. Xiao Yinyu had returned to the Imperial City a few days ago. The matters in the southern city had finally been settled. Although the Xiao family of the southern city did not gain much from the battle, and even suffered some losses, it was not a serious injury. It was not a big deal. Xiao Yinyu stayed in the southern city for a few days before returning to the Imperial City. Currently, the entire Light Wind Empire was in chaos and the flames of war were everywhere. Xiao Meng was also worried about her and asked her to return to the Imperial City. However, while Xiao Yinyu was back in the Imperial City, Xiao Meng was once again leading an army into battle. Owner Bu, give me a jar of Ice Heart Jade Urn Wine. Xiao Yu stepped into the store and found a familiar seat. He used a hoarse voice to speak to Bufang, who was curled up on the chair. Xiao Yinyu also ordered some dishes and told Ouyang Xiaoi the names of the dishes. Bufang stood up from the chair and stretched his body. He paced around with his hands clasped behind his back, nodded at Xiao Yinyu and Xiao Meng, and then stepped into the kitchen. Xiao Xiaolong and Yu Fu were cooking in full swing. Their culinary skills were getting more and more proficient. Even though they were not as good as Bufong, at least Bufong was satisfied with them. Taking out a kitchen knife, Bufong began to process the ingredients. His mental energy was highly concentrated, and his knife skills were getting more and more proficient. The way he processed the ingredients was even more gorgeous. Bufong felt that his knife skills had almost reached a bottleneck. His meteor knife skill had long been maxed out. Bufong lit the fire and heated the wok. His movements were as smooth as flowing water, and the dishes were quickly stir-frying under his hands. An enchanting fragrance wafted out of the kitchen and lingered in the entire store. Soon, the dishes were cooked. Bufong placed the dishes on the window, and Ouyang Xiaoyi took them away. Carrying a jar of ice-hard jade urn wine, Bufong wiped off the water on his hands and walked out of the kitchen. He arrived at the table of the Xiao siblings and handed the wine jar to Xiaoyu. Xiaoyu happily opened the seal of the wine jar, poured himself a cup of wine, and drank a mouthful of it with relish. Bufong pulled out a chair and sat on it, calmly looking at the two. Xiao Meng's expedition had indeed brought a lot of good news to the imperial city. Xiao Meng had killed his way out from the imperial city, passed through several large counties, and suppressed countless rebels. The imperial city, which had always received bad news, now sent back a lot of good news. Ji Qingxue heaved a sigh of relief. Ji Qingxue also heaved a sigh of relief, but he still couldn't relax. Xiao Meng had yet to meet Ji Qingyu's forces. Ji Qingyu now seemed to have a powerful backer, and he didn't know how strong his army was. If Xiao Meng lost, then the empire would really be in for a tough battle. Bufong chatted with Xiaoyu for a while. Since he was ready to join the army and become a cook, he needed to have some understanding of the army. Even though Xiaoyu didn't spend much time in the army, he definitely knew more about the army than the clueless Bufong. The two of them chatted for a long time. It was mainly Bufong asking and Xiaoyu answering. Even though Xiaoyu was a little puzzled as to why the owner Bu was always asking him about matters related to the army. After chatting for a while, the wine was finished and the dishes were finished. The two of them bid farewell to Bufong and left the store. Wave after wave of customers came to the store. As the store's reputation spread, the business became better and better. The better the business was, the closer Bufong was to his promotion. After a day of hard work, Ouyang Xiaoyi, Xiao Xiaolong, and the others bid farewell to Bufong. Yufu also returned to her room to rest. As night fell, the kitchen of the store was brightly lit. Bufong was practicing one familiar dish after another. As a chef with a strong desire to improve himself, he had to practice cooking every day to keep himself in peak condition. System: when will I set off for Western Mystery City? How do I join the army? After returning to his room, Bufong took a shower and asked the system while drying his wet hair. The system will activate the teleportation array in 2 days. As for joining the army, the host will have to figure it out himself, the system replied solemnly. The corners of Bufong's mouth twitched. Did the system mean that he would have to figure out a way to join the army himself? This was the first time he realized that the system was actually so unreliable. Thinking of this, Bufong couldn't help but feel a headache. Join the army? How? Would the army accept you? Why would they accept you? Blinking his eyes, Bufong suddenly felt that his trip to Western Mystery City was a blur. After thinking for a while, Bufong couldn't come up with a good solution. He lay down on the bed and fell asleep. Compared to a headache, Bufong felt that sleep was more important. 2 days passed by quickly. During these 2 days, the store was still open as usual. He also completed his daily cooking training. Oh, I will be leaving the store in a while to continue my cooking training. I can't tell when exactly I will be back. The business of the store will depend on you too, Bufong said seriously to Xiao Xiaolong and Yu Fu in the kitchen. I will teach you a new dish when I return. Xiao Xiaolong and Yu Fu's eyes immediately lit up. Xiao Xiaolong even patted his chest and promised to take good care of the store. Yu Fu, on the other hand, was more gentle and only nodded. Bufong patted Xiao Xiaolong's shoulder and nodded. He looked at him with a favorable gaze and said, "Do a good job, young man. When I return, I will test your knife skills, carving skills, and cooking skills." The one who loses will be given a satisfactory punishment. Again, Xiao Xiaolong's face stiffened. His face was filled with despair. Of course, he understood the punishment. Even now, when he thought of it, his heart couldn't help but tremble. His wrist was still aching. Yufu looked at Xiao Xiaolong's dark face and couldn't help but burst into laughter. Bufang gave the two more instructions and returned to his room. The second stop of the gourmet map, Western Mystery City, is about to open. The solemn voice of the system resounded. Then, Bufang's sharp eyes noticed that a white dot suddenly appeared in the air. It started to spin rapidly and draw a mysterious magic array. Bufang was already used to it. He had experienced this magic array many times. The second stop of the gourmet map, there is even an additional temporary mission. Bufang muttered to himself. Then, the magic array in the air became more and more condensed. In the end, it became real. A gust of wind rose and covered Bufang's body. When a strong wind stopped, the whole room regained its tranquility. Bufang's figure had already disappeared. Chapter 280. The Western Mystery City was located in the northwest of the Light Wind Empire. It was an old city with a long history and had survived through many dynasties. This ancient city, which resembled an old man in his twilight years, was situated on the boundless northwest Great Plains. It was the largest city in the western part of the Light Wind Empire. It was the military stronghold that connected the northwest Great Plains to the 100,000 mountains. Outside the Western Mystery City, on the ancient road that was filled with yellow sand, a strong wind howled, causing the already flying yellow sand to undulate even more. When the howling wind stopped, two figures slowly walked out from the yellow sand. One of them had a pair of red eyes that emitted an awe-inspiring aura. Cough, cough. Bufang covered his mouth and nose with one hand, while his other hand was constantly waving, trying to disperse the dust in front of him and the yellow sand that made him choke. The environment here is really bad, Bufang thought with a frown. After walking for a while, the surrounding yellow sand finally stopped. Xiao Bai's clone followed closely behind him, its red eyes flashing. Bufang patted White Yi's stomach, then raised his head and looked at the majestic city in the distance, which exuded a grand and ancient aura. It was a city that made his breathing a little heavy, not because of anything else, but because of the awe-inspiring pressure that came from this city with a long history. That was the Western Mystery City. Bufang's eyes flickered slightly. This was the purpose of his trip. He wanted to join the army of the Western Mystery City and become a military chef, also known as a cook. A man and a machine walked straight on the vast plains. After walking for a while, they arrived in front of the city. The city gate was extremely huge, almost the same size as the gate of the Imperial City. It was majestic, and there were many soldiers guarding the gate. These soldiers were different from the soldiers of the Imperial City, at least in terms of spirit, energy, and spirit. There was a sharpness in their eyes that the soldiers of the Imperial City did not have, and a sense of fierceness that even Bufang could not describe. Perhaps it was because the people of the Northwest were more valiant, so the soldiers trained there naturally had a sense of valiance. Covered in dust, Bufang's face was also covered in dirt. He led Xiao Bai into the Western Mystery City along with the other travel-worn citizens. After entering the city, Bufang first experienced the local conditions and customs of Western Mystery City. He found an inn. After all, he was not familiar with the people in the place, so it was impossible for him to directly charge into the enemy's army and ask them to accept him as a cook. Bufang had been strolling in Western Mystery City for about a day and a half, and he had tasted many of the delicacies of the northwestern cities. The food here was simple and plain, not as luxurious as the ones in Southern City. Most of them were noodle dishes, but there were also those simple and unpretentious barbecued meat. Bufang tasted all of them, and it was a different kind of taste. However, he didn't encounter any delicious dishes that could be recorded in his recipe notebook, which was a little regretful. Bufang also knew that there might be many authentic delicacies that he hadn't tasted yet. However, he didn't have time to taste them one by one. He had to quickly find an army to join. Inside a bustling restaurant, Bufong sat at a table by the window, savoring the delicacies of the Northwest while admiring the beautiful scenery of Western Mystery City. The security of Western Mystery City was very good. Soldiers holding long spears could be seen marching in an orderly manner inside the city. After calling for the waiter, Bufong took out a gold coin and handed it to the boorish-looking waiter who had a lame leg. "Sir, this is too much." The boorish-looking man immediately looked at Bufong with some doubt. A gold coin for a meal. This xiaobai in front of him looked like a nouveau riche. "No, after deducting the cost of the meal, consider the rest of the money as payment for my hard work in asking you questions," Bufong said lightly. The waiter's eyes immediately lit up. He looked at Bufong, patted his chest, and said, "You're straightforward. Dear customer, please tell me. This lowly one will definitely answer you without missing a single word." Bufong pondered for a while, glanced at the waiter, and slowly said, "How many armies are there in Western Mystery City?" The waiter was stunned when he heard Bufong's question. He frowned and looked at Bufong, saying, "Sir, there's only one army in our Western Mystery City. That is the Western Mystery Army that all the men in the Northwest yearn for." All the men in the Northwest yearn for it? Is the Western Mystery Army as powerful as you say? To tell you the truth, I used to be a soldier in the Western Mystery Army. However, my leg was crippled in a battle, so I left the army and came to this restaurant to work as a waiter, the waiter said and patted his crippled leg regretfully. If my leg wasn't crippled, I would definitely not leave the army until my last drop of blood was shed for the Western Mystery Army. I heard that the Empire is in chaos again, and the war has started again. I don't know how many of my brothers will die on the battlefield. The waiter's expression was a little regretful and lonely. Bufong was silent. He didn't know much about these things, but since the waiter was a soldier from the battlefield, it was normal for him to have such sentiments. The Western Mystery Army. It sounded very powerful. "Can you introduce me to the Western Mystery Army?" Bufong asked. "Why not? The Western Mystery Army is the most famous in our Western Mystery City because it is the main force that protects our Western Mystery City." The waiter said, "Due to the unique geographical location of the Western Mystery City, the Western Mystery City will encounter all kinds of disasters every year. Sometimes the spirit beasts that escape from the 100,000 mountains threaten the Western Mystery City. The Western Mystery Army has to deal with these problems. Every time these beasts go berserk, they are killed by the Western Mystery Army. They can't threaten the people of our Western Mystery City. Moreover, the Western Mystery City's great general, who is the eldest son of the Western Mystery City City Lord, General Kong Xian, has an amazing cultivation level. It is said that he recently broke through to the Battle Saint realm and became the #1 expert in the Western Mystery City. With him at the helm, the Western Mystery City is even more invincible. It's not that I'm bragging, but even if the Empire's army encounters the Western Mystery Army, the Western Mystery Army won't be the slightest bit inferior." The waiter said a lot. Obviously, he knew the Western Mystery Army very well and was very proud of the Western Mystery Army. He often patted his chest unconsciously as he spoke. Bufong listened attentively and nodded his head from time to time. Then the last question. Bufong paused for a moment, then looked at the waiter and continued to ask, "If I want to join the Western Mystery Army, do you know any way to do so?" Dear customer, you want to join the Western Mystery Army?" The burly man in front of him suddenly widened his eyes and looked at Bufong in astonishment. This Xiaobai's face. His skin was soft and tender, and he was obviously from a wealthy family. Why would he want to join the Western Mystery Army? Bufong smacked his lips, took out another gold coin, and handed it to the burly man. He said, "Of course I want to join the army to train myself and make myself stronger." Seeing that it was another gold coin, the burly man's eyes suddenly lit up. He quietly put it away, then patted his chest and promised, "Dear customer, since you trust me so much, let's not be polite. It's not difficult to join the Western Mystery Army. Now that the war has started, the conscription has been going on. However, It's not easy to join the Western Mystery Army. How about this? I'm familiar with the people in the army, so I'll take you there tomorrow. I'll tell them to take care of you. Hee hee. Bufong was taken aback for a moment. Then the corners of his mouth curled up, and he nodded his head. The waiter touched his head honestly, then dragged his lame leg and left step by step. The next day, Bufong went to the restaurant again. The waiter was already waiting for him at the entrance. "Young master, let's go. I've already asked the innkeeper for half a day's rest. I'll take you there now." "Oh, you can call me Aaron Yo," the burly man said with a smile. Bufong nodded his head and followed behind Aaron Yo. The two of them walked toward a certain location in the Western Mystery City. The Western Mystery City was very big. However, according to Aaron Yo, the location of the conscription office was not far from where they were. Hence, they continued to walk. After about an hour, they finally arrived at the location Aaron Yo mentioned. The conscription office was very big. It was set up in front of a mansion, and there was a long queue in front of the door. "Young master, do you see it? These people are all planning to join the Western Mystery Army. However, more than 90% of them will be assigned to other small military camps. It's still difficult for them to join the Western Mystery Army. I'll go and ask, but I don't have much confidence," Aaron Yo said solemnly. Then, Aaron Yo dragged his lame leg and walked toward the group of soldiers. Bufong observed Aaron Yo's movements and realized that he was really familiar with the people there. He was talking to an armored soldier. After a while, Aaron Yo brought the soldier over. The soldier was somewhat arrogant. He held his head high and clasped his hands behind his back. Aaron Yo followed beside him with a face full of smiles. "Chief Lu, this is the young man I told you about. He wants to join the Western Mystery Army. What do you think? Wants to join the Western Mystery Army? Who doesn't want to join the Western Mystery Army? Why should I open the back door for him?" Chief Lu said as he glanced at Bufong with a strange puppet following behind him. He noticed Aaron Yo's soft and tender skin. Bufong furrowed his brows. What was going on? "Lad, you want to join the Western Mystery Army, right? Of course you can. However, shouldn't you at least give me something?" Chief Lu sneered. Aaron Yo immediately glared at him. He had already given Bufong a gold coin when he tried to establish a relationship with Bufong. Bufong glanced at Aaron Yo's expression and understood what was going on. It seemed like the man in front of him thought he was a sucker and wanted to rip him off. Once he got the money, it would be another matter whether he would do anything for him or not. However, Bufong couldn't be bothered with him. He said calmly, "Make the arrangements for me first. Money is not a problem." Bufong took out a few more gold coins from his bosom and tossed them in his hand. The shiny gold coins made a clattering sound and dazzled Aaron Yo and Chief Lu's eyes. Chief Lu's eyes immediately lit up, and the smile on his face became even wider. He reached out his hand to grab the gold coins, but how could he win against Bufong? Well said, well said. If you want to join the Western Mystery Army, look for me, Chief Lu, the most reliable person. Aaron Yo, you can go back first. This young master, please come with me." Chief Lu coughed and clasped his hands behind his back as he spoke to Aaron Yo. Then, he led Bufong into the mansion. Aaron Yo didn't suspect anything. He and Chief Lu were comrades in arms. Even though Chief Lu was greedy, they were still comrades. He would probably arrange a position for his young master. Hence, he bid farewell to Bufong and left the mansion with his crippled leg. However, he didn't know that when Chief Lu turned his head, his eyes narrowed and a sneer emerged on his face. Chapter 281. Stepping into the mansion, the inside of the mansion was a completely different world. There was only one gate to the mansion, and there was actually a huge drill ground inside. There were many armored soldiers training on the drill ground, sweating profusely. Do you see this? This is the Western Mystery Army's drill ground. Those who can train here are the true elites of the Western Mystery Army. They're the elites who have gone through a strict selection process. Ordinary people don't stand much of a chance. Chief Lu walked in front with his hands clasped behind his back and his head held high as he proudly announced. Bufong glanced at the soldiers on the drill ground with an expressionless face. The cultivation level of these soldiers was not weak. Most of them were third-grade battle maniacs. They were indeed the elites of the Western Mystery Army. However, Bufang was not interested in this. His goal was to join the Cook's Army unit and become a military chef. At the moment, his main concern was to complete the mission and obtain the last fragment of the God of Cooking set. As the owner of the Golden Dragon Bone kitchen knife, Bufang knew better than anyone how useful the God of Cooking set was. Therefore, Bufang was looking forward to the second fragment of the God of Cooking set. Moreover, this God of Cooking set would definitely improve his cooking skills and allow him to cook more delicious dishes. For a moment, Bufang's mind wandered again, and he didn't hear what Chief Lu said. After following Chief Lu for a long time, they passed by the drill ground and arrived at a remote corner of the mansion. The place was a little messy with piles of rubble. Chief Lu stopped in his tracks, turned around, and looked at Bufang with a faint smile. Bufang was taken aback. Why did this guy stop? He frowned as he looked around at the desolate surroundings and the scattered rubble on the ground. It was obvious that this was not a military registration area. This Chief Lu was trying to stir up trouble. A flurry of footsteps was heard, followed by a clamor. A large group of hooligans swarmed in behind Bufang. These dark-skinned youths were staring at Bufang with malicious intent. Yo, Chief Lu, you got yourself another idiot who wants to join the Western Mystery Army. Hee, look at his fair and tender face. Maybe he's a rich young master. A spoiled, rich young master must have a lot of money on him. This trip won't be a loss. The sound of chattering reverberated in this seemingly deserted corner. The echoes were rather creepy. Xiaobai followed behind Bufang. Xiaobai raised his chubby hand and touched its bald head, its mechanical eyes flashing with a red light. Chief Lu smirked and squinted at Bufang. He found a large rock and sat on it, looking at Bufang calmly. Young man, it's true that you want to join the army, but don't even think about getting in through the back door. Our Western Mystery Army is a regular army, and we're all meant to fight with real swords and guns on the battlefield. You spoiled young masters won't be able to endure this kind of hardship. I'm doing this for your own good. Chief Lu looked at Bufang with a teasing look. I'm doing this for the sake of your lives. So, you better listen to me. Hand over all your money. Let us have some fun, and then go home. Chief Lu looked at Bufang with disdain. He had seen his fair share of soft-skinned rich kids like Bufang, and this was not the first time they had done something like this. These rich kids were soft-skinned and probably had never seen blood before. On the battlefield, they would only serve as cannon fodder. Not only would they bring harm to themselves, but they would also bring harm to their comrades in the army. Therefore, these Xiaobai who wanted to join the army could not pass the normal selection process. They usually prefer to get in through the back door. Most of those who got in through the back door ended up in Chief Lu's hands. Chief Lu would not be merciful to these fat sheep. If he could, he would. Bufang did not panic at all. Even though he was surrounded by a group of ill-intentioned hooligans, he remained calm and collected. His composure made Chief Lu's mocking smile disappear involuntarily. Bufang furrowed his brows. He did not care about the soldiers around him who were merely third-grade battle maniacs. He did not even need Xiaobai to do anything. With his current level of cultivation, he could suppress this group of people until they did not dare to utter a single word. What he cared about was whether Chief Lu would let him join the army, especially the Cook's Army unit. If he could not, he would have to think of another way. That would be troublesome. Why are you acting like an idiot? Didn't you hear what the chief said? Hand over all your money. A bald young man glared at him and rushed up to Bufang. He bared his teeth at Bufang and said viciously. However, Bufang merely glanced at him and ignored him. Instead, he looked at Chief Lu and asked calmly, "Can you arrange for me to join the army?" Chief Lu was taken aback, as were the people around him. Then, they burst into laughter. The bald young man was grinning from ear to ear. He looked at Bufang as if he was looking at an idiot. "Chief Lu, this is the dumbest person you've found so far." Judging by his attitude, he still wants to join the army. The bald young man guffawed. Chief Lu also laughed for a while before he stopped. Then, he looked at Bufang and said, "Of course I can arrange it for you. But do you think I will? If a rich kid like you, who only knows how to eat and wait to die, enters the army, you will be a disaster. Oh, so you mean you can arrange it for me? Bufang asked seriously. Of course. I, Chief Lu, am the leader of squad after all. Arrange a place for me. Wait, why do you care so much? Just hand over all the gold coins you have and get the hell out of here. Chief Lu frowned and waved his hand. The bald young man grinned and clenched his fists. His knuckles made cracking sounds. Kid, be a good boy. I've seen a lot of Shao Bai faces like yours. Hand over your money and you might be spared some pain. Or else what? Bufang stared coldly at the bald young man. Or else eat my fist. The bald young man did not expect Bufang to have the guts to glare at him, even under such circumstances. He was surrounded by his men. Reckless fool. The bald young man snorted in his heart. He swung his fist toward Bufang's handsome face. He hated Shao Bai faces that were more handsome than him the most. Bang! But soon, the bald young man's face stiffened. He realized that his fist had been caught by someone. His slender fingers and warm palm caught the fist of the bald youth. The surrounding people were stunned, and their bodies trembled. This, Old Zhang, is a third-grade battle maniac. How could his fist get caught by Shao Bai's face, who doesn't even have true energy? Chief Lu's heart skipped a beat. He suddenly had a bad feeling. Crack! Bufang's expression was calm. He exerted a little force in his hand and broke the bald youth's arm as easily as breaking a chicken's wing. Then he loosened his grip, and the bald youth's figure squatted down in pain, howling miserably. Bang! Bufang showed no mercy. With a kick, he landed squarely on the young man's chest, sending him flying several meters away and crashing at Chief Lu's feet. The bald young man fell to the ground and howled miserably. Blood flowed from his mouth, and his face turned purple. The crowd was enraged. They did not expect Shao Bai, who did not even have true energy, to dare to fight back. He was simply looking down on them. Who the hell told you to fight back? Damn it, you're courting death. Another youth bellowed at Bufang, his voice filled with rage. Bufang was taken aback. He was so angry that he was amused. Was he not allowed to fight back? What kind of logic was this? The worldview of these people was really interesting. Turning around to glance at the young man who shouted, Bufang moved his body and sent him flying with a kick. Without the slightest hesitation, the young man fell to the ground, gasping for breath. Chief Lu's eyes narrowed. Bufang's two moves made him realize that this Shao Bai's face was trained. However, just as he was about to open his mouth to say something, his companions were already enraged, and they all rushed forward. Then, a surge of pressure surged out from the calm young man's body. That pressure, bang! Chief Lu's face turned pale as he knelt on the ground. The pressure made him lose the courage to fight back. That surging true chi aura was simply incomparably terrifying. It was even stronger than their commanders. This young man in front of them. Who the hell was he? This kind of person wanted to join the army. Why did he have to go through the back door? Was this a joke? Bufang released the pressure of a 6th-grade battle emperor. Instantly, the group of people knelt on the ground. Even though Bufang's combat ability was not strong, his pressure was the real deal. Shao Bai, strip them and throw them out. As for the leader, I still have questions for him. Bufang said calmly. Shao Bai's mechanical eyes flickered. With a blink of red light, he dashed out like a whirlwind. Rip, rip, accompanied by a series of screams and cries. Figures flew out from the abandoned land and fell on the main road of the drill ground outside. These figures were all naked. A chill swept through them, and the wind blew at their balls. They were all stripped naked. They stood up with their hands covering their crotches. They looked at Shao Bai as if he was a pervert and fled in a panic. The guy whose arm was broken by Bufang was even more pitiful. He howled in pain while covering his crotch, trembling as he fled. Chief Lu was scared out of his wits. He knelt on the ground and looked at Bufang with eyes full of terror. Say, Senior, this humble one is wrong. Chief Lu was on the verge of tears. The aura of this Shao Bai was completely different from that of the rich kids he had met. How could someone like him have to go through the back door to join the army? Was he trying to make fun of him? Bufang walked up to Chief Lu with an indifferent expression. He retracted the pressure on his body and looked down at Chief Lu, who was kneeling on the ground, as calm as ever. Since you said you could arrange for me to join the army, then do it for me. I'll atone for my sins by meritorious service. Bufang said. Chief Lu's heart skipped a beat. He quickly patted his chest and promised Bufang. Of course, the army would welcome such a strong man. He might even get credit for recommending him. However, Bufang's next words caused him to freeze on the spot. His mouth was so wide open that an egg could be stuffed inside. Remember to get me into the cook's unit of the Western Mystery Army, the kind of unit that serves as a military chef. Do you understand? Bufang looked at Chief Lu and said seriously. Chapter 282. As soon as Bufang finished speaking, he ignored Chief Lu, who was standing there in a daze, and walked toward the gathering point of the Cook's Army unit of the 3rd Corps, where Chief Lu was stationed. However, Bufang had no regrets. His only goal was to join the army, practice his culinary skills, complete the system's mission, and obtain the reward. Although the cooks of the army were the cooks of the army, they had to work much harder than ordinary soldiers. When marching in the army, they had to carry a large iron pot and carry kitchen utensils. They had to escort the rations and supplies. Sometimes, when they encountered the enemy who robbed or burned the rations, they had to personally go into battle. Zhu Yu, the commander of the 3rd Corps of the Western Mystery Army, said and chased Chief Lu away. Watching Bufang's back, Chief Lu's face twitched uncontrollably. After a moment of hesitation, he turned around and walked toward the commander of the 3rd Corps. Bufang raised his eyebrows. He already knew that the 3rd Corps was probably the weakest among the 3 armies of the Western Mystery Army. A ferocious, murderous aura soared into the sky, as if it was about to disperse the clouds. Bufang took the token from Chief Lu's hand and glanced at him coolly. Don't worry, I mean you no harm. I'm just a chef who came here to train. I just want to experience what it's like to be a chef in the army. If I really wanted to join the army and serve the Empire, I could have just gone straight to the Emperor. Yes, there's only one Western Mystery Army, but it is divided into 3 branches. The 1st Corps is the Western Mystery Army's elite unit, the 2nd Corps is the main force, and the 3rd Corps is the army I belong to. Chief Lu's face became a little embarrassed as he spoke. One by one, the soldiers fell into pools of blood. Their eyes were bloodshot as they brandished their blades with all their might. In the end, Chief Lu arranged for Bufang to join the army. However, contrary to his solemn promise, this army was not the Western Mystery Army's elite unit. I just don't want to make it public. After I finish my training, experience the experience of being an army chef, and hone my culinary skills, I will leave. I won't do anything to endanger the Western Mystery Army. Old Zhang, why are you banging on the stove again? Can't you just tell me what you want? If you hit the wok every day, sooner or later you'll break it. The towering city walls of Spring Sunshine City were already covered in mottled scars. Soldiers were piled up on top of the city walls, and all of them looked extremely exhausted. Outside the big city, the mountains and plains were filled with waving military flags and tyrannical shouts. The densely packed figures of the army intersected with each other. You want to join our 3rd Army's Cook's Army unit? Clang, clang, clang. Although he didn't know how strong Bufang's cultivation was, if such a strong person joined the army, he had to be reported. After all, he was a soldier of the Western Mystery Army. A loud voice rang out from the camp. Then, several figures walked out. This was war. Bufang roughly estimated that there might be hundreds of people in the Cook's Army unit. However, this was normal. After all, they had to maintain the meals of thousands or even tens of thousands of soldiers. The bead emitted an obscure fluctuation as light flickered on it. The array on its surface seemed to have awakened. A figure wrapped in a black robe sat cross-legged on the ground. A fierce wind blew over, carrying with it the thick stench of blood and killing intent. The robe fluttered noisily. A suction force that was hard to be felt by ordinary people was emanating from the bead. From the battlefield below, tens of thousands of warped and wailing souls were drawn out. The murderous intent and resentment mixed together were all absorbed by the bead. He was really afraid. The face of Xiao Bai before him was an extremely powerful existence. Even now, he still felt a lingering fear when he thought of that pressure. The Western Mystery Army's third army? Didn't you say that there was only one army in Western Mystery City? Bufang asked as he looked at Chief Lu with a puzzled expression. Such a powerful existence. If he went directly to General Kong Xian, he would definitely be assigned a better position. More importantly, this guy actually wanted to join the Cook's Army unit. That was a place for chefs. What was a strong person like him doing there? Senior, although I am a member of the Western Mystery Army's third army, I am still a soldier of the Western Mystery Army. A strong person like you. If you want to join the army, why do you need to sneak in? Why don't you go directly to our general? Chief Lu looked at Bufang's slender figure and couldn't help but ask the question in his heart. Moreover, it was a young man like Bufang. With his fair and tender face, one could tell at first glance that he was from a rich family. The slightly older middle-aged man squinted his eyes. His gaze fell on Bufang, who was standing behind Chief Zhang. He raised his eyebrows in surprise. Ji Qingyu was clad in armor. His face was solemn as he rode on a single-horned warhorse. He held a long sword in his hand and let out a roar. Soon, a group of soldiers wearing linen uniforms and aprons dashed out from the army camp. Some of them were very young, some were very old, but only a few were young and strong. As soon as the old man entered the camp, he picked up a big iron wok and tapped it with a ladle. The people around him looked at Bufang with a playful smile. The aura of the departed soul orb grew stronger and stronger, becoming extremely terrifying. The venerable master's eyes were filled with fanaticism as he watched the departed soul orb grow stronger and stronger. He licked his dry lips. As for which army he was in, Bufang didn't really care. Dao Prefecture, Spring Light City. Bufang calmly looked at the middle-aged man and shook his head. That was why very few people joined the army, just to join the Cook's Army unit. Senior, this is the third corps of the Western Mystery Army, where I belong. You should know that ordinary people are not allowed to join the elite troops of the Western Mystery Army. I'm not qualified to let anyone join the elite troops of the Western Mystery Army, Chief Lu said as he bowed to Bufang, his face full of fear. Chief Lu was dumbfounded. What fourth-grade battle spirit? The pressure on Xiao Bai's face, that fighting prowess, wasn't something a fourth-grade battle spirit could compare to. However, Bufang nodded seriously. The old man was helpless because the token was real. Even though he was puzzled as to why Bufang wanted to join the Cook's Army unit, he didn't reject the idea. After all, the Cook's Army unit had always been lacking in manpower, especially the Cook's Army unit of the Third Corps. According to your description, that young man is probably a fourth-grade battle spirit. A fourth-grade battle spirit can easily take care of you guys who don't train diligently. However, it is indeed a pity for a fourth-grade battle spirit to join the Cook's Army unit as a cook. Chief Lu, you just need to send someone to keep an eye on him. The Shura sect venerable slightly opened his eyes. True energy permeated his entire body as he held a round gray bead in his hand. The rule is that you have to show us your skills first. If your skills are up to standard, I will assign you an iron wok and let you cook. If not, TSK, you'll have to collect firewood for a few months. The middle-aged man narrowed his eyes, then stuck out his tongue and licked his lips. High in the sky, hundreds of meters above the ground. However, contrary to Chief Lu's expectation, the commander of the Third Corps didn't really care about this matter. Even though Chief Lu had described Bufang as extremely powerful, the commander merely expressed his regret. Bufang followed the old man to the army camp. It wasn't a very big camp. Compared to the other army camps, this one was shabby and small. You are the new recruit who joined our Cook's Army unit. Do you know the rules of our Cook's Army unit? The middle-aged man's mouth twitched as he sized up Bufang. An old man took the token from Bufang's hand, glanced at it, then stared at Bufang suspiciously. Hey, Captain, isn't there a new recruit? We should welcome him, shouldn't we? Old Zhang stopped tapping the wok and laughed dryly. The heavy city gates of Spring Sunshine City creaked as a large group of armored cavalrymen rushed out of the city gates. Like sharp knives, they tore apart Ji Qingyu's army. In a few days, our Third Corps will follow General Kong out of the city on an expedition. Remember to get your subordinates ready and have the cooks prepare a delicious meal. Chief Lu's face was flushed. He didn't expect his report to be ignored like this. However, this usually prosperous city was currently filled with billowing smoke. Every corner of the city was filled with a panicked atmosphere. The citizens were all hiding in their own houses in a panic as they shivered. This was a prosperous city in the Light Wind Empire. It was famous in the empire, had a flourishing economy, and had a large population. Even though it couldn't compare to the three great ancient cities, it was still an iconic city of the Light Wind Empire. The two of them collided with a loud bang. On the city wall, numerous arrows rained down like a torrential rain. Then, the sounds of weapons clashing, shouts, and battle cries all mixed together, blending into one, and no one was able to distinguish between them. Then, the densely packed soldiers behind him charged toward the mottled Spring Sunshine City with an imposing manner. They were like a ferocious tiger that was about to tear everything apart. The Spring Sunshine City was like a wounded prey that became the prey of the ferocious tiger. Chapter 283. As soon as Bufang finished speaking, he ignored Chief Lu, who was standing there in a daze, and walked toward the gathering point of the Cook's Army unit of the Third Corps, where Chief Lu was stationed. However, Bufang had no regrets. His only goal was to join the army, practice his culinary skills, complete the system's mission, and obtain the reward. Although the cooks of the army were the cooks of the army, they had to work much harder than ordinary soldiers. When marching in the army, they had to carry a large iron pot and carry kitchen utensils. They had to escort the rations and supplies. Sometimes, when they encountered the enemy who robbed or burned the rations, they had to personally go into battle. Zhu Yu, the commander of the Third Corps of the Western Mystery Army, said and chased Chief Lu away. Watching Bufang's back, Chief Lu's face twitched uncontrollably. After a moment of hesitation, he turned around and walked toward the commander of the Third Corps. Bufang raised his eyebrows. He already knew that the Third Corps was probably the weakest among the three armies of the Western Mystery Army. A ferocious, murderous aura soared into the sky, as if it was about to disperse the clouds. Bufang took the token from Chief Lu's hand and glanced at him coolly. "Don't worry, I mean you no harm. I'm just a chef who came here to train. I just want to experience what it's like to be a chef in the army. If I really wanted to join the army and serve the empire, I could have just gone straight to the emperor. Yes, there's only one Western Mystery Army, but it is divided into three branches. The First Corps is the Western Mystery Army's elite unit, the Second Corps is the main force, and the Third Corps is the army I belong to." Chief Lu's face became a little embarrassed as he spoke. One by one, the soldiers fell into pools of blood. Their eyes were bloodshot as they brandished their blades with all their might. In the end, Chief Lu arranged for Bufang to join the army. However, contrary to his solemn promise, this army was not the Western Mystery Army's elite unit. "I just don't want to make it public. After I finish my training, experience the experience of being an army chef, and hone my culinary skills, I will leave. I won't do anything to endanger the Western Mystery Army." "Old Zhang, why are you banging on the stove again? Can't you just tell me what you want? If you hit the wok every day, sooner or later you'll break it." The towering city walls of Spring Sunshine City were already covered in mottled scars. Soldiers were piled up on top of the city walls, and all of them looked extremely exhausted. Outside the big city, the mountains and plains were filled with waving military flags and tyrannical shouts. The densely packed figures of the army intersected with each other. "You want to join our Third Army's Cook's Army unit?" Clang, clang, clang. Although he didn't know how strong Bufang's cultivation was, if such a strong person joined the army, he had to be reported. After all, he was a soldier of the Western Mystery Army. A loud voice rang out from the camp. Then, several figures walked out. This was war. Bufang roughly estimated that there might be hundreds of people in the Cook's army unit. However, it was normal. After all, they had to provide for thousands or even tens of thousands of soldiers. The bead emitted an obscure fluctuation as light flickered on it. The array on its surface seemed to have awakened. A figure wrapped in a black robe sat cross-legged on the ground. A fierce wind blew over, carrying with it the thick stench of blood and killing intent. The robe fluttered noisily. A suction force that was hard to be felt by ordinary people was emanating from the bead. From the battlefield of tens of thousands of soldiers below, the wailing phantom souls were being drawn out. The murderous intent and resentment mixed together were being absorbed by the bead. He was really afraid. The face of Xiao Bai before him was an extremely powerful existence. Even now, he still felt a lingering fear when he thought of that pressure. The Western Mystery Army's Third Army? Didn't you say there was only one army in Western Mystery City? Bufang asked as he looked at Chief Lu with a puzzled expression. Such a powerful existence. If he went directly to General Kong Xian, he would definitely be assigned a better position. More importantly, this guy actually wanted to join the Cook's army unit. That was a place for chefs. What was a strong person like him doing there? Senior, although I'm a member of the Western Mystery Army's Third Army, I'm still a soldier of the Western Mystery Army. A strong person like you. If you want to join the army, why do you need to sneak in? Why don't you go directly to our general? Chief Lu looked at Bufang's slender figure and couldn't help but ask the question in his heart. Moreover, it was a young man like Bufang. With his fair and tender face, one could tell at first glance that he was from a rich family. The slightly older middle-aged man squinted his eyes. His gaze fell on Bufang, who was standing behind Chief Zhang. He raised his eyebrows in surprise. Ji Qingyu was clad in armor. His face was solemn as he rode on a single-horned warhorse. He held a long sword in his hand and let out a roar. Soon, a group of soldiers wearing linen uniforms and aprons dashed out from the army camp. Some of them were very young, some were very old, but only a few were young and strong. As soon as the old man entered the camp, he picked up a large iron wok and used a ladle to knock on the wok. The surrounding people immediately looked at Bufang with a playful smile. The energy of the departed soul orb continued to grow stronger and stronger, becoming extremely frightening. The venerable master's eyes were filled with fanaticism as he watched the departed soul orb grow stronger. He licked his dry lips. As for which army he was in, Bufang didn't really care. Dao Prefecture, Spring Light City. Bufang calmly looked at the middle-aged man and shook his head. That was why very few people joined the army just to join the Cook's army unit. Senior, this is the Third Corps of the Western Mystery Army. You should know, the elites of the Western Mystery Army are not accessible to ordinary people. I don't have the qualifications to allow anyone to join the elite troops of the Western Mystery Army, Chief Lu said to Bufang with a terrified expression on his face. Chief Lu was instantly dumbfounded. What fourth-grade battle spirit? The pressure on Xiao Bai's face, that fighting prowess, wasn't something a fourth-grade battle spirit could compare to. However, Bufang nodded seriously. The old man was helpless because the token was real. Even though he was puzzled as to why Bufang wanted to join the Cook's army unit, he didn't reject the idea. After all, the Cook's army unit had always been lacking in manpower, especially the Cook's army unit of the Third Corps. According to your description, that young man is probably a fourth-grade battle spirit. It's easy for a fourth-grade battle spirit to deal with you guys who don't train diligently. However, it's indeed a pity for a fourth-grade battle spirit to join the Cook's army unit as a cook. Chief Lu, just send someone to keep an eye on him. The Shura sect venerable slightly opened his eyes. True energy was spreading all over his body as he held a round gray bead in his hand. The rule is that you have to show us your skills first. If your skills are up to standard, I'll assign you an iron wok and let you cook. If not, TSK, you'll have to collect firewood for a few months. The middle-aged man narrowed his eyes, then stuck out his tongue and licked his lips, hundreds of meters above the sky. However, contrary to Chief Lu's expectations, The commander of the Third Corps did not seem to care much about this matter. Even though Chief Lu had described Bufang as extremely powerful, the commander merely expressed his regret. Bufang followed the old man to the army camp. It wasn't a big camp. Compared to the camps of the other armies, this one was shabby and small. "You're the newcomer who joined our cook's army unit? Do you know the rules of our cook's army unit?" The middle-aged man's mouth twitched as he sized up Bufang. An old man took the token from Bufang's hand, glanced at it, then stared at Bufang suspiciously. "Hey, Captain, isn't there a newcomer joining us? We have to welcome him, don't we?" Old Zhang stopped tapping the wok and laughed dryly. The heavy city gates of Spring Sunshine City creaked as a large group of armored cavalrymen rushed out of the city gates. Like sharp knives, they tore apart Ji Qingyu's army. In a few days, our Third Corps will follow General Kong out of the city on an expedition. Remember to get your subordinates ready and have the cooks prepare a delicious meal. Chief Lu's face was flushed. He didn't expect his report to be ignored like this. However, this usually prosperous city was currently filled with billowing smoke. Every corner of the city was filled with a panicked atmosphere. The citizens were all hiding in their own houses in a panic as they trembled. This was a prosperous city in the Light Wind Empire. It was famous in the empire, had a flourishing economy, and had a large population. Even though it couldn't compare to the three great ancient cities, it was still an iconic city of the Light Wind Empire. The two of them collided with a loud bang. On the city wall, numerous arrows rained down like a torrential rain. Then the sounds of weapons clashing, shouts, and the sounds of fighting mixed together, blending together and becoming indistinguishable. Then, the densely packed soldiers behind him charged toward the mottled Spring Sunshine City with an imposing manner. They were like a ferocious tiger that was about to tear everything apart. The Spring Sunshine City was like a wounded prey that became the prey of the ferocious tiger. Chapter 284. As soon as Bufang finished speaking, he ignored Chief Lu, who was standing there in a daze, and walked toward the gathering point of the cook's army unit of the Third Corps, where Chief Lu was stationed. However, Bufang had no regrets. His only goal was to join the army, practice his culinary skills, complete the system's mission, and obtain the reward. Although the cooks of the army were the cooks of the army, they had to work much harder than ordinary soldiers. When marching in the army, they had to carry a large iron pot and carry kitchen utensils. They had to escort the rations and supplies. Sometimes, when they encountered the enemy who robbed or burned the rations, they had to personally go into battle. Zhu Yu, the commander of the Third Corps of the Western Mystery Army, said and chased Chief Lu away. Watching Bufang's back, Chief Lu's face twitched uncontrollably. After a moment of hesitation, he turned around and walked toward the commander of the Third Corps. Bufang raised his eyebrows. He already knew that the Third Corps was probably the weakest among the three armies of the Western Mystery Army. A ferocious, murderous aura soared into the sky, as if it was about to disperse the clouds. Bufang took the token from Chief Lu's hand and glanced at him coolly. "Don't worry, I mean you no harm. I'm just a chef who came here to train. I just want to experience what it's like to be a chef in the army. If I really wanted to join the army and serve the Empire, I could have just gone straight to the Emperor. Yes, there's only one Western Mystery Army, but it is divided into three branches. The First Corps is the Western Mystery Army's elite unit, the Second Corps is the main force, and the Third Corps is the army I belong to." Chief Lu's face became a little embarrassed as he spoke. One by one, the soldiers fell into pools of blood. Their eyes were bloodshot as they brandished their blades with all their might. In the end, Chief Lu arranged for Bufang to join the army. However, contrary to his solemn promise, this army was not the Western Mystery Army's elite unit. "I just don't want to make it public. After I finish my training, experience the experience of being an army chef, and hone my culinary skills, I will leave. I won't do anything to endanger the Western Mystery Army." "Old Zhang, why are you banging on the stove again? Can't you just tell me what you want? If you hit the wok every day, sooner or later you'll break it." The towering city walls of Spring Sunshine City were already covered in mottled scars. Soldiers were piled up on top of the city walls, and all of them looked extremely exhausted. Outside the big city, the mountains and plains were filled with waving military flags and tyrannical shouts. The densely packed figures of the army intersected with each other. "You want to join our 3rd Army's Cook's Army unit?" Clang, clang, clang. Although he didn't know how strong Buffon's cultivation was, if such a strong person joined the army, he had to be reported. After all, he was a soldier of the Western Mystery Army. A loud voice rang out from the camp. Then several figures walked out. This was war. Buffon roughly estimated that there might be hundreds of people in the Cook's Army unit. However, this was normal. After all, they had to maintain the meals of thousands or even tens of thousands of soldiers. The bead emitted an obscure fluctuation as light flickered on it. The array on its surface seemed to have awakened. A figure wrapped in a black robe sat cross-legged on the ground. A fierce wind blew over, carrying with it the thick stench of blood and killing intent. The robe fluttered noisily. A suction force that was hard to be felt by ordinary people was emanating from the bead. From the battlefield below, tens of thousands of warped and wailing souls were drawn out. The murderous intent and resentment mixed together were all absorbed by the bead. He was really afraid. The face of Xiao Bai before him was an extremely powerful existence. Even now, he still felt a lingering fear when he thought of that pressure. The Western Mystery Army's 3rd Army? Didn't you say that there was only one army in Western Mystery City? Bufong asked as he looked at Chief Lu with a puzzled expression. Such a powerful existence. If he went directly to General Kong Xian, he would definitely be assigned a better position. More importantly, this guy actually wanted to join the Cook's Army unit. That was a place for chefs. What was a strong person like him doing there? Senior, although I'm a member of the Western Mystery Army's 3rd Army, I'm still a soldier of the Western Mystery Army. A strong person like you, if you want to join the army, why do you need to sneak in? Why don't you go directly to our general? Chief Lu looked at Bufong's slender figure and couldn't help but ask the question in his heart. Moreover, it was a young man like Bufong. With his fair and tender face, one could tell at first glance that he was from a rich family. The slightly older, middle-aged man squinted his eyes. His gaze fell on Bufong, who was standing behind Chief Zhang. He raised his eyebrows in surprise. Ji Qingyu was clad in armor. His face was solemn as he rode on a single-horned warhorse. He held a long sword in his hand and let out a roar. Soon, a group of soldiers wearing linen uniforms and aprons dashed out from the army camp. Some of them were very young, some were very old, but only a few were young and strong. As soon as the old man entered the camp, he picked up a big iron wok and tapped it with a ladle. The surrounding people looked at Bufong, unruffled in the midst of the chaos. Their smiles were rather playful. The aura of the departed soul orb grew stronger and stronger, becoming extremely terrifying. The venerable master's eyes were filled with fanaticism as he gazed at the departed soul orb's growing radiance. He stuck out his lips and licked his dry lips. As for which army he was in, Bufong didn't really care. Dao Prefecture, Spring Light City. Bufong looked at the middle-aged man calmly and shook his head. That was why very few people joined the army just to join the Cook's Army unit. Senior, this is the 3rd Corps of the Western Mystery Army. You should know, the elites of the Western Mystery Army are not accessible to ordinary people. I don't have the qualifications to allow anyone to join the elite troops of the Western Mystery Army, Chief Lu said as he bowed to Bufong, his face filled with fear. Chief Lu was immediately dumbfounded. What 4th-grade battle spirit? The pressure on Xiao Bai's face, that fighting prowess, wasn't something a 4th-grade battle spirit could compare to. However, Bufong nodded seriously. The old man was helpless because the token was real. Even though he was puzzled as to why Bufong wanted to join the Cook's Army unit, he didn't reject the idea. After all, the Cook's Army unit had always been lacking in manpower, especially the Cook's Army unit of the 3rd Corps. According to your description, that young man is probably a 4th-grade battle spirit. It's easy for a 4th grade battle spirit to deal with you guys who don't train diligently. However, it's indeed a pity for a 4th grade battle spirit to join the Cook's army unit as a cook. Chief Lu, just send someone to keep an eye on him. The Shura's sect venerable slightly opened his eyes. True energy was spreading all over his body as he held a round gray bead in his hand. The rule is that you have to show us your skills first. If your skills are up to standard, I'll assign you an iron wok and let you cook. If not, TSK, you'll have to collect firewood for a few months. The middle-aged man narrowed his eyes, then stuck out his tongue and licked his lips. Hundreds of meters above the sky. However, contrary to Chief Lu's expectations, the commander of the 3rd Corps did not seem to care much about this matter. Even though Chief Lu had described Bufang as extremely powerful, the commander merely expressed his regret. Bufang followed the old man into the army camp. It wasn't a big camp. Compared to the other army camps, this one was shabby and small. You're the newcomer who joined our Cook's army unit. Do you know the rules of our Cook's army unit? The middle-aged man's mouth twitched as he sized up Bufang. An old man took the token from Bufang's hand, glanced at it, then stared suspiciously at Bufang. Hey, Captain, isn't there a newcomer joining us? We should welcome him, shouldn't we? Old Zhang stopped tapping the wok and laughed dryly. The heavy city gates of Spring Sunshine City creaked as a large group of armored cavalrymen rushed out of the city gates. Like sharp knives, they tore apart Ji Qingyu's army. In a few days, our 3rd Corps will follow General Kong out of the city on an expedition. Remember to get your subordinates ready and have the cooks prepare a delicious meal. Chief Lu's face was flushed. He didn't expect his report to be ignored like this. However, this usually prosperous city was currently filled with billowing smoke. Every corner of the city was filled with a panicked atmosphere. The citizens were all hiding in their own houses in a panic as they shivered. This was a prosperous city in the Light Wind Empire. It was famous in the empire, had a flourishing economy, and had a large population. Even though it couldn't compare to the 3 great ancient cities, it was still an iconic city of the Light Wind Empire. The two of them collided with a loud bang. On the city wall, numerous arrows rained down like a torrential rain. Then, the sounds of weapons clashing, shouts, and the sounds of fighting mixed together, blending together and becoming indistinguishable. Then, the densely packed soldiers behind him charged toward the mottled Spring Sunshine City with an imposing manner. They were like a ferocious tiger that was about to tear everything apart. The Spring Sunshine City was like a wounded prey that became the prey of the ferocious tiger. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.